We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com.
Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered, and we're recording early this week, so if news breaks during the week, won't be on this episode of the podcast. Sometimes we get Monday news, but we're recording on a Monday morning this week because of my schedule and needing to go to the dentist on our unusual recording time.
Amazon Prime Day too today. So
that's right.
What's going on?
Yeah. We don't know what
haven't had a chance to look at it. Yeah, I looked a little bit, and I honestly, I've never really cared.
Done a whole bunch on Amazon Prime Day.
Mm-hmm. I order Amazon all the time. My wife thinks I order it too much, and it's almost certainly true. But it's convenient and it's easy, and it gets here fast, and I can return it very easily, which is the most important part. Like, I never used to return things ever, and then Amazon came along, and I'm like, this sucks. It's going back.
Guilt-free. You feel so guilt-free with them.
Well, and honestly, I mean, I think I was more conservative with my purchases, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I would, if I found something I liked, I just kept buying it. So, for example, underwear has been my current, and my targeted ads these days, just full of crotches. It's just,
Great.
it's not pleasant for me, but I've been shopping for underwear a lot because I got some, I needed some, I got some, and they didn't fit right, so I sent them back. So I got another one, didn't fit right, sent them back, kept doing this. I'm just like,
now that's the AV news you tune in for, folks.
I never would have sent back underwear before Amazon.
No.
I just, that's just weird. It's weird to do. But now I'm like, it's just Jeff Bezos. Screw that guy.
You didn't want the
right?
store demo pair?
Right. You can't even demo them in the store. So at the store, I would just be like, I know that these work for me. I will buy more of them. And then I can't do that anymore. But it did, like I said, it does make me a little bit more adventurous of a buyer. I will buy something that I think might work, or that might be interesting, or might be the solution for my problem. I'll get it home, I'll look at it, I'll try it out and go, not really, and then send it back, which I would never have done before. So there's that. All right, this is Happy Father's Day.
That's right.
Post for all you fathers out there living in those past, and father figures as well. It doesn't have to be your biological father. There's lots of people out there that have influenced my life, both male and female, that I would look up to as a father figure, if you want to do it that way. And you should reach out to those people in whatever way you're comfortable with, and let them know that you appreciate them. And as a father myself, I will tell you, it's never too late to do something, because this year I got a slotted spoon. So it's the only thing on my list that I was a couple other things on my list.
Like
but the only thing on the list
that they strain?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have many slotted spoons, but they're all metal, and I wanted a plastic or a wooden one so I could use with my non-stick skillet. And I said, that's my 11-year son insists on buying me stuff, and he wanted to get me an Oculus gift card. I'm like, I don't want an Oculus gift card, Plus, he doesn't have the money for it anyway, so $5, whatever. Go to Target and get me a slotted spoon.
Nice.
So that's what I got. It was nice, and we did Premiere Access Cruella.
Ah, cool.
So we can talk about that if we want.
Sure.
All right, this is AV Rant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. Question@avrant.com. You can also go to avrant.com, leave us a comment, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant. Rob's direct line is rob@avrant.com. His Twitter is @firstreflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is @avrant_Tom, which I've checked my Twitter like twice this week. It's been crazy.
Just indulging over there.
I am. All right. I want to thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you have to support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is going to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and leave us a PayPal donation. So we want to thank Michael and Rafael? It's not Raphael, because there should be an E in there. So Rafael? No.
I'm going to have to take a stab at it soon, aren't I? Michael, Rafal. I'm going to go Rafal.
I think Rafal makes the most sense to me. Anyways, so we did get a note from Michael,
nice.
who, when he left his donation, he said, "Thank you, Rob and Tom, for answering my receiver pre-pro question. I'm feeling much better about using a receiver with the 4-ohm Polk LSI speakers. I'm looking at the Denons per your recommendation. Going the Denon route will save some money. May wait for the 2021 models. And to answer your question, the front wall is made up of shiplap siding.
Oh, okay.
So if you remember, this is the one with the hidden door that had what we thought was wood siding up front, which I guess it is. It's shiplap siding. They thought it would make a great material for hiding a door, and just to make sure, they just had to make sure all the boards were lined up. So yeah, it works really well.
It did.
It's very nice.
Indeed. So. I did not have that photo queued up, but
that's okay. I just saw it just now when I
Thank you very much to Michael for that feedback. Appreciate it, and glad we put your mind at ease. And thank you to Raffle as well. Rafal, we're not sure how to pronounce your name. We're sorry, but thank you very much for the PayPal donation either way.
I don't know how many times DJ had a drink on that one, but it seems like at least 3 or 4.
Neither of us was correcting the other because we don't know.
We don't know. We also want to thank our 126 patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon is a service that you can sign up for. Every month, they'll take some money from you and give it to us, making you an ongoing, contributing, supporting listener type person who also loves this podcast. So sign up, patreon.com/AVRant podcast.
That's the one, patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. So thank you very much to our 126 patrons over there.
All right, we got some notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going from Jay, Lance, Mark, Dan, who I guess we're sorry about the Atmos music from Apple Music on Apple TV. That's too much Apple.
It is.
Atmos music from Apple Music on Apple TV 4K that Rob caused. I guess you messed something up. Brenda's husband, who made a typo in his previous email and misspelled his own daughter's name. It wasn't Taurus. It's Tara. So.
Yep.
That's...
We both looked. We confirmed it was spelled TARAS' at first, and I'm like, Taurus is a name. It's a Ukrainian name, so I'm not gonna.
Is it? I wouldn't know.
I'm not gonna question it. I was like, you would know, but he's like, oh no, it's not. It's not Taurus. It's Tara or Tara. Tara? I don't know.
Tara, probably. It's probably Tara. So we can call him Andrew or Brenda's husband or Tara's dad. You're Brenda's husband. So.
All right.
We want to say Chad also sent us a note saying Happy Father's Day to Tom. Chad's dad is who got him into home theater, so maybe one of Tom's kids will get in the home theater bug too. We'll see. My kids strongly resist anything I'm interested in.
That's how it goes.
I'm not.
Well,
so it's Jay, Lance, Mark, Dan, Brenda's husband, and Chad.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'll repeat the names: Jay, Lance, Mark, Dan, Andrew, Brenda's husband, Tara's dad, whatever the name, however we're going to call you, and Chad. Thank you all very much for the notes of gratitude, for keeping the podcast going. Thank you to everyone who continues to listen and send in your questions.
This is a low-key way for me to get more female listenership. Just by I'm gonna refer to all of you by your wife's name.
There you go.
That's it. Just send in your wife's name so that they'll listen to.
Nice.
And then they can tell their friends.
That would be good.
I'm telling you, home theater does not have to be some sort of boys club. It just doesn't.
I mean, we know it isn't exclusively because we do have female listeners who write into us, we probably have female listeners who don't write to us. But there are definitely more questions from male listeners. That is unequivocally, objectively the truth. If we totaled up everyone who has ever sent in a question to us, and therefore we know they have listened to us, it would definitely predominantly be men.
Yeah. And, like I said, it doesn't have to be, certainly there's no reason why it has to be that way. So I'm, just because my wife literally could care less does not mean that all wives out there could care less. I love my wife, but man, dude, sometimes she just doesn't get it.
Not
and
into
that's
home theater.
Fine.
That
just doesn't care. She just wants to be able to hear. I'm telling you, if she didn't marry me, she wouldn't have a TV.
Right.
We moved when we got married. She had a 36-inch or 30-inch TV. I had like a smaller one. She's like, I never turn it on. I'm like none of those words make sense in that order. What are you talking about? She's like, I just don't really watch TV. I'm like, well, I do. So, you do what you're going to do. I'm going to sit down and watch some TV. So that's been the thing. So anyway, Vincent Teo, that's in the news now here. Vincent Teo from HGTV Test managed to get a pre-production sample of an Onkyo TX-RZ50 receiver, Onkyo's first new RZ model in over 2 years being pre-production. He wasn't able to dig into all the details, but the headline features that it has 7 HDMI inputs, 3 of which are 40 gigabits per second HDMI 2.1 ports that are able to pass through 4K at 120 with all flavors of VRR. No adapters, no firmware update, no hardware board to swap. So this is going to work out of the box. Onkyo could seriously come back onto the scene with a absolute.
That is for sure. Yes.
This could be their chance to finally become relevant again. I just miss the days of being able to rock. Onkyo was like when I bought receivers, the first couple of ones I bought, they were Onkyos because they were like the best, that you could get. At least in my
features
price
for
bracket.
The price. They were the leaders for sure.
For years they were, and then they started doing 2EQ and Odyssey, and we went, uh-oh.
But I don't know. Did I put this? I can't remember what I wrote there.
I'll finish. I haven't finished reading it yet. So Vincent was able to connect a PS5, Xbox Series X, and a PC with an NVIDIA RTX 3090 graphics card all at the same time. The RZ50 is apparently using the newest Panasonic HDMI chipset, so they seem to have sorted out the HDMI 2.1 issues. And it's a big black box that basically looks like every other big black box, except it has a whole bunch of buttons on the front, which we haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah, they did do that on the front of their design there. But one of the other bits of news was this was back at CES, the virtual CES that we had at the beginning of the year. Way back then, Onkyo and Pioneer said that on their higher tier models, they'd have Dirac as the room correction program. So Vincent wasn't able to confirm that just yet, this being pre-production model. But if that's the case, then we are certainly away from the days of 2EQ and AccuEQ.
I'm not really sure how I feel about this speaker terminals above the pre-outs thing they got going on here. I feel like that's just trouble waiting to happen. Are the subwoofers on the side though? I can't tell.
No, the subwoofer pre-outs are on the bottom. They're below the surround binding posts.
Yeah.
So
I don't know how I feel about that. All right.
I guess they're figuring you might not use both at the same time, but you might.
You might. What is this clock thing? Okay, Anyway, so Vincent was able to get a hold of a product list showing upcoming Onkyo, Integra, Pioneer, and Pioneer Elite receiver models with their minimum advertised pricing, or MAP. Other than the entry-level Onkyo NR5100, that's $600, all the models listed appear to use the new HDMI 2.1 board, giving them 3 inputs at 40 gigabits per second. The least expensive option is the $700 Pioneer VSX 935, followed closely by the $750 Pioneer Elite LX105, and then the $800 Onkyo NR6100. So there's pricing here. Where's the Onkyo?
There's a whole table and list of models. So I mean that's a good sign. It seems like Onkyo and Pioneer are on their way back. They have the backing of Vox now, the parent company of Klipsch. So this is positive signs for this company. I hope they make a comeback, and I hope they can spur on some competition to Denon and Marantz and Yamaha. Right.
So Denon and Marantz are together. Mm-hmm. Yamaha is its own thing.
Yep.
And this would be, all these guys are now together under one umbrella. So, they should be able to, I don't know that you need Onkyo, Integra, Pioneer, and Pioneer Elite.
They were already joined together prior to their troubles. So, yeah.
But the RZ50 that he was testing was $1,400. So
back at CES they had originally announced it for $1,100, but that has now become the price of the NR7100 in the non-RZ series. Now, typically the top of the NR series and the bottom of the RZ series are the same. They just give it the different chassis, and maybe the power supply is beefed up a little, but that's questionable. It's pretty much just the different chassis. The NR7100 is going to be $1,100. They did even say all the way back at CES that pricing was definitely subject to change because of the fluctuations in component prices.
Sure.
But yeah, that looks promising. Definitely something to keep an eye on here.
So it's interesting they're listing how many gigabits per second that each input can do. So you've got your 2.1 inputs, the 3 of them are doing 40, and then on the top end models of all of these things, except for the regular Pioneer, which of course doesn't have that. It's like 24 gigabits per second. And then the front one will be 9.
Yeah.
Which, like, I guess that's so you can plug in your phone. They're like, you don't really
pretty
need it
much
up there, whatever.
That's what that seems
and
to be.
And then the lowest is 18 on the regular inputs on the back, which is not that bad.
I mean, that's HDMI 2.0. So, yeah. I mean, the other bit of speculation we have is, according to Vincent, it is a Panasonic branded HDMI board. That's the same company that was behind the boards that were in the Denon Marantz and Yamaha 2020 models that, in the case of Denon Marantz, had the single input. So if Onkyo and Pioneer were able to get a hold of a Panasonic HDMI board that works with the 4K 120 and VRR pass-through already working, and it has 3 40 gigabit per second inputs, I'm like, might Denon Marantz have gotten those same boards? One might hope, but only time will tell.
I'll tell you what, if Denon Marantz come out with another model that has one HDMI 2.1 input, we're gonna go into a crisis over here. like we've been suggesting Denon and Marantz for so long that if they do that, we'll just have to be like, Okay. So here's some good news. If your idea of good is a Black Mirror episode, Facebook is bringing interactive ads to your Oculus Quest games. They'll start popping up in the game Blaston from Resolution Games right away, and games from a couple of other developers in coming weeks. You can click on the in-game ads to see more and find out why you're seeing that particular ad, or hide the ad. And don't worry, Facebook knows you might be wondering about your privacy and just how much of your data is being tracked and used to serve you ads inside VR. It's all of it, in case you're wondering. They're tracking all of it. They're not going to say that, but that's the truth. Well, they have a whole list of all the data they say they aren't sharing with advertisers. Like, they won't use the cameras to show advertisers your room that you're playing in, and they won't share all of your hand tracking and head movement data, and they won't let advertisers listen to your microphone or see any of your text messages. See? That's what they're not doing.
I mean, all those ideas just pop directly into their head, and they're like, don't worry, we won't do these things that we immediately thought of.
Yeah, the thing that they asked for. These are the things they're asking for, and we said no.
That's right.
Not right now.
All we did was bring, cameras that face outward and therefore see your entire room, and, track all of your movement, and a microphone and a whole system you can use to send messages between people. That's all we did, was bring that into your house, and then we open it up to advertise. But we won't share any of that. Not right now, anyway.
Yeah. They say the ads are necessary if they're going to bring VR to everyone. Surely this will only lead to good things and won't be intrusive at all. Yeah, I'm not super thrilled about these ads.
Those ads that pop up when you're playing Candy Crush won't be like that at all when you're in VR. It'll be totally fine.
It'll be totally better than that. Yeah, I can't wait. Shut up.
Well, I'm eagerly anticipating the second generation of PlayStation VR now, although Sony will probably end up putting ads in their VR games at some point too. But if they don't, I'll switch over there, even though it'll have a cable.
Yes, it will. All right, let's get to some questions here. Francis, a member of the Xbox Insider program. As such, he's running the beta release that lets you play games in Dolby Vision. The thing is, when that option is turned on, all games show up in Dolby Vision mode, and he's certain not all games are programmed to use it. Some games end up looking, we'll just say, weird.
Yeah.
But that aside, his understanding is that Dolby Vision sends metadata on a scene-by-scene or even frame-by-frame basis, correct? How does it do that for games? Through the power of positive thinking.
So, actually, we're going to bring up Vincent Teo from HDTV Test once again, because he's been looking into the Dolby Vision for Games situation, mainly because people have been asking about the support of Dolby Vision for Games on some of the more popular TVs, because they did discover, when people who are on the Insider program for Xbox plugged it into even like a brand new, say, a C1 OLED, or, well, I guess it wouldn't be anything from Samsung because they don't support Dolby Vision full stop. And it probably wouldn't be a Sony because they don't support VRR. So it's probably going to be an LG where people were looking for it. But when people did that, they were able to get Dolby Vision working from their games off of an Xbox Series X, but not at 120 frames per second. It was capped at 60 frames per second. Okay. And so now, just recently, LG released a new firmware for their C1 and G1 OLEDs only. They did say that they're trying to bring it to the C10 and G10 from last year. No mention of C9 from 2019, but they're trying to bring it to last year's models as well. But now, after that most recent firmware update, Dolby Vision from an Xbox Series X in 4K at 120 hertz works with variable refresh rate too. So at least there is one TV out there that can support all the things that an Xbox Series X might do. But Vincent went on to do some more testing and basically discovered that it is what we would call the player-led version, or the source-led version of Dolby Vision, which means that your television is not receiving an ongoing stream of metadata, and then the television is processing that to map it to its capabilities. Instead, it's the player-led version of Dolby Vision. That's what Sony used to use in all their televisions when they first supported Dolby Vision. Their current Sony televisions do both player-led or TV-led now, but back in the day, it was player-led only with Sony TVs. But the player-led version, there is still some metadata that's going back and forth, but it's a minimal amount, and it's basically for the television to tell the player what its maximum light output is, and then the player does, or in this case, the game system, does the tone mapping on the fly, frame by frame or scene by scene, before sending it to the television. So that's sort of the difference there. So there isn't a stream of ongoing metadata coming out of the Xbox Series X and going to your television, and then your television is doing all the Dolby Vision processing. Instead, the television is essentially telling the Xbox Series X how bright it can get, and then the Xbox Series X is tone mapping frame by frame before sending out the data. That's where the processing is taking place. Now, Vincent has been right on top of the whole HGIG, the High Dynamic Range Gaming Interest Group. And the idea there was that you have a test pattern on your television and on your game system, rather, a test pattern on your game system. And on your television, you have to put it into HGIG mode. Now, when you put it into HGIG mode, the television stops tone mapping. The television does not tone map anything at that point. It's just like, here's what I can do, the native capabilities of the panel. That information is fed to the game system, and using that test pattern that's built in the game system, you move up the brightness level until it clips. And that tells the system, all right, that's how bright you can get. Because now that your TV is not tone mapping, once you reach as bright as the TV can get, it just clips. Everything just turns white after that point. And you adjust the test pattern on the game system just up to the point where it clips, and therefore your game system knows, okay, that's as bright as I can get. And it does it for both a full screen white and just a 10% window white, because like on an OLED, it can make that 10% window brighter than it can make the entire screen when it's white. So it gets both of those pieces of data, how bright it can get with a full screen white, how bright it can get with a 10% window. So if you are using HGIG, your game system is already doing what Dolby Vision could do in this scenario. It's already setting itself to say, all right, I know how bright your TV can get, and now I'm going to tone map the game inside the game system on the fly before I send it to your TV, because I know how bright it can get. In the Dolby Vision system, you don't go through any test pattern. It's relying on metadata coming from the TV to tell the game system how bright it can get. And then it tone maps before it sends it to your TV. So on the games, because you're absolutely correct, almost none of the games actually support Dolby Vision in the software itself, and yet it's taking games that are HDR10 and putting it into a Dolby Vision container. Vincent did some tests, and he's like, well, actually, the whatever metadata is being sent from, in his case, an LG C1, doesn't seem to be quite as accurate as setting it manually, because the Dolby Vision version clipped more information than when he manually did the HGIG version and set the test pattern himself. He's like, I retained more detail by setting it manually and turning Dolby Vision off than I did by relying on the metadata that the television sent to the Xbox Series X. Because he said basically, it seems like the LG C1 is telling the Xbox Series X that it can show 1000 nits, and it can't. It can show 700. So that seems to be what's going on there. So how is the system doing it? Well, it's just getting this information where it gets either metadata or, in the case of HDIG, the manual setting of how bright the TV can get, both full screen and 10% window, and then it's tone mapping the video stream before it sends it to the television in either case. Yeah, so that's...
And that's always going to be the case, though, right? I mean, with Dolby Vision or anything where it's automated,
right?
They're relying on the TV being able to send back information,
that's
or
right.
However they do it, even if it's just I know what kind of TV you are or what brand
that's
and
right.
model, and therefore there's this lookup table and it says this is how bright this TV can get. Could be accurate, could not be accurate.
Indeed.
It's not going to be accurate 10 years from now, that's for sure. Because it's your TV's going to dim over time, but
so the other tricky part of it is that okay, so we know not all games have Dolby Vision built in, so at that point the system, the Xbox, is just relying on what the television sends because there's no information from the game itself. Then when it comes to HDIG, not all games support HDIG. You set HDIG on the Xbox as a system-level setting, but not all games respond to it. So then there are games that just have their own menu, their own calibration menu built into the game, and it might be ignoring everything. It might be ignoring Dolby Vision, it might be ignoring HDIG, and it just goes by what you set in the options menu of the game itself. So it is not clear and easy for gamers at all. Setting HDIG doesn't guarantee you that it's working properly. Turning on Dolby Vision doesn't guarantee you that it's working properly. Essentially, in the end, you still end up checking game by game. So all of these things that were designed to make it easier for HDR in gaming, unfortunately, that's in real life not the case. Sorry, Francis.
So Francis also just got a NVIDIA Shield Pro. It's connected to his 4K TV. It's got a bajillion different video output settings available. What is the correct one?
Yeah. So this does, of course, depend a little bit on the capabilities of your TV. I can't recall what exact TV Francis has, but there is sort of a way to figure out for yourself, regardless of which TV you have, what is going to be best. So you start with the resolution. He knows he's got a 4K TV, so it's going to be one of the 3840 by 2160 resolution options. You start there. Then really what you want to do is figure out what frame rate you want your NVIDIA Shield Pro to output. Because it does have this match frame rate beta, which is not automatic under any circumstances. You always have to actually push a button to activate the match frame rate whenever you're presently watching something. But as far as I can tell, it still only works with Netflix. It doesn't seem to work with any other services. And then if you're worried about Plex actually has frame rate switching built into the Plex app. It ignores what you said in the NVIDIA Shield and just does its own frame rate switching in the Plex app. But Netflix is about the only one that the NVIDIA Shield's frame rate switching seems to work on. So you should decide, do you want it to output well, unfortunately, it gives you the options of integer 60 hertz or the 59.94 hertz, which is what you would actually want to use if you want to output what we normally call 60 hertz. It actually gives you the choice. You can do integer 60 or 59.94. So if you want 60 hertz, what we normally call 60 hertz, actually choose 59.94. But if all you want to do is watch video on this thing, you don't want to play any games, then I would set it to the 23.976 hertz, which we normally call 24 hertz, and unfortunately there is an integer 24 hertz option, so choose 23.976. So if you go into the advanced options for the video output, and you filter by 4K resolution and 23.976 hertz, you're only going to end up with a few options at that point, once you've filtered down to there. So then it's a matter of, do you want it to output HDR10, or do you want it to output HDR10 and Dolby Vision? Because that's really the final choice there. You want to make sure that under all circumstances, if you do have a TV that supports HDR, that you've chosen the Rec 2020 color space, because there's either Rec 709 or Rec 2020. choose the Rec 2020 color space, and the NVIDIA Shield actually does a good job of taking any Rec 709 content and putting it into a Rec 2020 container without messing up the colors. So don't futz around with the switching between Rec 709 and Rec 2020. Leave it in Rec 2020. So you drill down. 3840 by 2160. Choose the frame rate that you want. If it's video, I would suggest 23.976. Rec 2020 color, and then whether you support HDR10 only or both HDR10 and Dolby Vision. And so whatever your TV supports, that'll get you to the right one. You drill down in that order.
Okay. I completely wasn't paying attention.
You were definitely reading something. I don't know what you were reading, but I could see your face.
I'm looking at a bike. I'm looking at a bike that I like.
You're not even paying attention to the show notes. I thought you were reading ahead.
No, I was looking at a bike I wanted. Sorry, Rob. You lose me at the video settings. I got off the topic list because I was trying to control my AC from here.
Of course,
it's.
Guess what?
I'm hot. It's hot in here.
The daytime says he's cold in his theater. That'll be a monumental occasion.
It's never going to happen.
It's
it never
never
happens.
In Florida.
Between the lights and all the insulation that's in this room, I'm never getting cold in here. Reginald and Lance. We weren't sure exactly what tone Reginald intended when he asked for proof that separates don't sound better than receivers a couple of weeks ago, but thankfully he wrote back to say that he thought the discussion was very good, and he clarified that he's coming from the experience of never having owned an AV receiver. He's been in audio for 40 years now, but has always used separates, which actually makes a lot of sense because 40 years ago, receivers either didn't exist or they kind of sucked.
Right.
So separates were the way to go 40 years ago, and he would have been correct. I would have agreed with you 40 years ago. On the other side of the coin, Lance wanted to weigh in on his own experience, having owned many different AV receivers over the years. He still uses an AV receiver in his family room, but for his dedicated theater, he appreciates having separate amplification for some reasons we'll discuss as part of the questions. So, some more questions on the separates topic.
Yes.
So sometimes when we do these questions, sometimes when we do the podcast, I name the podcast before I look to see what Rob has named the podcast.
Okay.
So if Rob has named the podcast something and it usually matches up with what I thought we were going to name the podcast, but sometimes he changes his mind and gets a little clever, or maybe more to the point, takes what I wrote down and says, yeah, it's a little mean. I'm going to go ahead and make it nicer.
Or whenever alliteration is possible, I'll go for alliteration.
That's right. That's true. So sometimes the edits will make it to the show notes, the post, and the YouTube. But every once in a while, you're going to notice that the title of the podcast is something different, and on the actual file.
Right.
So if you look at the ID3 data or whatever it is that pops up when you're listening to it on your phone, might say something slightly different than what the actual name of the podcast is in every other place. This was one of them.
Okay.
I will tell you that. So if you go back and look at it, I probably said something mean, and I am not sorry, but I am warning you that I came from a place of just trying to be funny. All right, so some more questions. In the long run, wouldn't it be less costly to use separates? Reginald has been able to keep the same amplifiers for many, many years and only upgrade the preamplification when new inputs and formats demanded it. If you go with a receiver every time you upgrade, you're replacing all of it, amplification included. So doesn't that end up costing more over time? Do we want to keep reading?
Yeah, well, it's all together,
okay.
so...
Okay, so I'll keep reading. Lance also had a slightly different point about this, but closely related. He's driven full 9 or 11 speaker setups with just an AV receiver, and they end up getting hot. I guess the receiver ends up getting hot. He's actually had 2 receivers die on him. He's pretty sure there's no way that high heat is good for any electronics. By offloading at least some of the amplification, keeping the AV receiver driving 5 speakers from its internal amps at the most, he's measured considerably lower heat levels and never had an external amp or anything that was running mainly as a pre-pro die on him since. So cost over time and longevity, do these make a case for separates over receivers? Generally, no. Okay, so, and the reason is simply it's the law of high production rates, basically. An AV receiver, I don't even know if there was ever a time when a pre-pro was less expensive than an AV receiver because it didn't have amps in it. Maybe when receivers first came out, that might have been true. But since then, receivers have become so ubiquitous that we don't sell many pre-pros anymore. So to Lance's point, offloading some of the amplification so that you reduce heat on coming off of your receiver to keep it from cooking itself. I agree. I think having some external amplification, if you're going to be running as many speakers as we can now run in our home theaters, and that's only going up, makes sense. But you still buy a receiver because it's cheaper than buying a pre-pro. Almost every single time.
If you're getting a receiver that has pre-outs.
Right.
I mean, what I wanted to say first on Reginald's point is that, boy, does that make logical sense.
It does.
It makes all the sense in the world.
I should pay less for this thing that does. It's exactly the same electronics, except it doesn't have amplifiers.
Right.
Therefore, I should pay less. And the answer is, you should,
Yep.
but you can't.
I'm buying a box that has inputs, processing, digital analog converters, and amplifiers built in versus one that has the same inputs, processing, and digital analog converters, but no amplifiers built in. Which one costs less? Well, it's actually the one with the amplifiers built in. I mean, strangely, it's economies of scale. It's nothing else.
Right.
It has nothing to do with logic. It doesn't actually have to do with, like, if you just broke down a cost list of components, because yes, the one with amplifiers built in would cost more, but because of economies of scale, which one they manufacture and sell 10 times, 20 times more of, it's the receiver version that has it. And then if we get into like more esoteric brands where even if they sold receivers, they're selling 10 times fewer than a Denon or Marantz, and then you go to the pre-pro version of it, like it's even more so the case that a mass market receiver that has all the same inputs and processing as the pre-pro version costs less, even though it has amplification built in. So, I mean, I don't blame you whatsoever for thinking, of course, that would make sense. But on that term alone, even if you never use the amplifiers that are built into the AV receiver, you just make sure you get one that has pre-outs and you never use the amplifiers built in terms of if you upgrade every 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, in that case, long term, I'm not saying don't have the external amps. I'm just saying just the pre-pro, getting the receiver costs less. At this point. At this point, it does.
Right. Like I said, maybe 40 years ago when you first started and amplifiers receivers were first coming out, they may have been the luxury product that cost a lot more because they didn't make very many of them. Everybody was still buying separates. But now that's just not the case. Nobody. And very few people buy separates. In
terms of the longevity, though, I mean, that's one where, like, what Lance is bringing up, it's not all or nothing, right? Because if you are powering a modest, not too big, you're not sitting very far away, normal sensitivity or even high sensitivity speakers, and you're only powering 5 or 7 of them, which is a lot of people. Let's be honest here. It's a lot of people.
The vast majority of people.
Right. So that scenario, the chances that you're going to kill your AV receiver because of heat, pretty darn low. In fact, heat generated in that instance is probably going to be the video processing built into the receiver more than the amplification. But what Lance brings up, when you're starting to get to 9, 11, 13 speakers, by now, if you're doing a 9, 11, or 13 speaker system, there's a decent chance you're in a larger room sitting a bit farther away. So regardless, you'd be asking the amplifiers to output more wattage just by virtue of sitting farther away from your speakers. Like, all of those things add up. And totally agree. Like, I can, in my tiny theater where I don't face this problem, I could drive all 11 speakers off an AV receiver in my system, but I can hear, as soon as I connect more than 5 or certainly more than 7 speakers to any of the AV receivers I've ever owned, the noise floor goes up coming out of the speakers when they're all connected to one AV receiver. There's no question about it. So we talked about this last time. It's not all or nothing. We do recommend external amplification in a number of cases when it makes sense. And what Lance is bringing up, that's a case where it makes sense. We don't disagree whatsoever. And yes, you will get greater longevity, and you get a nice beefy amp. You can hold on to that thing for the rest of your life. So absolutely, we agree on those fronts. But yeah, it's the weird thing where the dedicated pre-pros, they cost more than the receivers. So we'd still get a receiver even if using it strictly as a pre-pro based on price.
I mean, and I know it's Father's Day has passed, but whenever we've done Father's Day or any sort of birthday, Christmas thing, I always say buy an amplifier for somebody.
Sure.
Because when you're purchasing AV gear, a lot of times there's so many variables that go into why somebody purchased a certain thing over another. Like the worst thing I think you can buy somebody is speakers. Like you have no idea what they want,
right?
And
if
how it's going to match with everything else.
Yeah.
But you buy somebody an amplifier and they're like, thank you, I can use this. Or even if they can't use it, they're like, I will use it someday.
I'll find a use for it. Yep.
So, having an external amplifier is, to me, never a bad thing. The thing that people get hung up on this podcast in particular is they come at us with questions like, do I need one? Answer, no. Do you want one? Yes, you do, because we all do.
Right.
I want one. Rob wanted one. Rob bought one. I went down the rabbit hole of wanting just a little 2-channel one and ending up almost buying 7-channel monolith thing because it made sense in my brain, and then I came back to my senses and bought the cheap little 2-channel one because that's all I really needed.
I don't need it, but I don't regret it. I don't regret having it. I'm perfectly happy.
Yeah. So, don't, just because we constantly tell people not to buy amplifiers because they don't need them does not mean that we don't think that that people should own them.
And
that's not the same
I do
thing.
want to clarify, we do have instances where we say, yep, you are finally a case where an external amplifier is highly recommended, if not outright needed. It does happen sometimes.
Right. So on the topic of limiting variables so that we can figure out what, if anything, is making a difference in the sound, Lance noted that with separates, you can keep the amplification in speakers and the connection between the amps and speakers untouched. If you're trying to compare two receivers, what's making the difference? You're forced to change multiple things, including the amplification. So if you're into critical comparison, doesn't it just make sense to have external amps from that perspective? Okay, so the amps shouldn't be making a difference.
Shouldn't be, but I mean, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
If you're like, especially if you're, say, comparing a Class AB to a Class D receiver, you're going to get one of the new Pioneer Elites. It's got Class D amplification built in, and you don't have any external amps, so you connect the first receiver, you connect the second receiver, like, well, what actually made the difference here? Was it the amplification that's built in, switching from Class A B to Class D, or was it something in the processing, or was it something in the DACs? I mean, we don't know. He's right. There's more variables going on there when you're changing all that. So I can get behind that. I can get, if your goal is to compare things head to head, hypercritically, and don't want to rely on measurements to do it. You want to listen to it and keeping the amplification, the speakers, the connection between the speakers and amplification, keeping all that identical, that is reducing the number of variables. It's still a bit tough because even just a pre-pro,
you can't switch it fast, so it doesn't really make that much difference. And
a pre-pro has more components than one built into it. What exactly inside of that pre-pro made the difference? If there was truly any difference to be had, there's still more variables, but he's right. That is limiting the variables. And then, I mean, he was also like, does that help with longevity, not plugging and unplugging speakers all the time? I guess. I use cheap banana plugs and I don't mind replacing them.
So Reginald understands that quite a few receivers include a full set of pre-outs, and the newest Denon Marantz models can even bypass their built-in amplifiers entirely and just be run as dedicated pre-pros. But the information he's always read and gone by, stereophile, is that the pre-amp sections of receivers are inferior to what you get from dedicated pre-pro. So even if the features are identical, won't your ears be better off going with the separate component? It's just not true.
That one
it's just flat out elitism is what it is.
That's
elitism.
Doesn't pan out, whether it be via blind testing or via measurement. One just doesn't pan out anymore. Again, if we're going back 30, 40 years, that might have been the case.
True. Yeah. I can't say for sure it was true, but it was there's probably more true. And these days, you can find receivers that measure cleaner pre-outs than separates.
Yeah.
Like
in the case, if you look at like over at Audio Science Review, they have this whole chart, this whole table of like all the preamplification things that they've tested, and they use a thing that they an acronym SINAD, that's the signal versus interference, noise, and distortion, right? So the higher the score, the higher the signal versus interference, noise, and distortion, objectively the better. Now they have this table where everything is ranked by the number it got, and of course this leads to a whole bunch of debate. Oh, look at this device, it scored higher. It's like, yeah, one of them scored 91 and one of them scored 92. I'm like, totally splitting hairs. So when you look at the vast majority of receivers with pre-outs versus the vast majority of dedicated pre-pros that have been tested, like they all clump together in this one region because, surprise, surprise, the components inside are actually largely identical in pretty much all the cases. So the chances that you're going to see big, but people still like to split the hairs because one of them scored 1 point higher. I put that completely out of my mind and go, no, they all bunch together right here in the middle. But you will notice that actually the highest scoring one on the table currently is a Denon X3700H. Like, if you, which one scored?
It's not even the top of the line.
It's not even the most expensive one. That one is actually at the top of that chart of a group of AV receivers and pre-pros. So on that front, we have to just say no, it's not the case that the dedicated pre-pros have superior pre-amplification stages built into them. But I see where he's coming from, because there's always that, again, it's almost like a logic argument. Like, if pre-pros cost more, like, doesn't that mean there must be something better about them? Like, how could they charge more if you could get the AV receiver version and pay less and actually get the same or possibly objectively better performance? It doesn't make sense. And I agree. It doesn't make sense on pure the face of it. But once you factor in economy of scale, that's where that all comes back to.
And why, I mean, why would they even bother most of the time with the AV receivers, especially at the top line AV, the Marantz and the Denons, where they'll have a top of line AV receiver, then they'll have a pre-pro version, which is just the amps taken out.
Yeah.
What are they going to do to that top of the line pre-pro that isn't already being done in the receiver option? I mean,
well,
silver
there's XLR
wire,
output some. Aren't those just inherently superior?
Inherently superior, right?
Because everything
there goes
inside,
my ground loop pump.
Everything inside is still single-ended, and all they did was take the resulting thing and then duplicate it and invert one side and send it on out of a different connector.
Yeah, it all makes sense until you do the actual measurements and you're like, I don't understand why this costs more.
Right.
Neither do we.
Neither do we. We've arrived. That's where, like, get an X3700H, put it in preamp mode.
Bob's your uncle.
That's right.
Take a drink. Bertrand in Quebec. He says, first couple of updates. ElectronicsForLess Canada finally issued a refund for the Marantz receiver that they never shipped to him. His last remaining issue with them is they still owe him a refund from an NVidia Shield Pro. His MasterCard dispute is still pending, but at least he has the lion's share of his issues with them resolved. And I mean, I'm glad.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Super unfortunate. I had no idea, no prediction it would go this way, so I'm very sad about the whole thing. But I'm NVIDIA Shield Pro, that's still in Canada, that's still a couple $100, so you want to get that back. But at least the like $3,500 for the AV receiver is back with the owner now, so that is a relief.
So his other update is they ordered the Gigabyte M27Q computer monitor we had recommended, and his bad luck continued. Amazon somehow shipped him the wrong model.
That's unusual.
That's very unusual.
Unusual.
Yeah, that's quite unusual. They corrected the mistake, but once he had the correct monitor, he wasn't entirely happy with it. Text in his web browser wasn't as sharp as he wanted, so he sent it back and found a great deal on a discounted 4K Dell monitor. He's happy with that and the price he paid. So good.
Excellent.
So he says, is it okay to leave his SVS SB1000 Pro subs powered on all the time? How much power are they consuming if he never puts them in standby or never powers them off completely? I 100% turn my subwoofers on and never turn them off.
Me too.
I can't do it.
I can't on, unless I know I'm leaving the apartment for a week, and then I'll power them.
I still don't turn them off because I'm afraid I'll forget to turn them back on or
That's
something.
True.
Yeah. I can't stand the thought that they might not power on in time for something. You know what I mean?
Okay.
There might be some slight delay. I know that I don't have to worry about that, but I can't do it.
So there's 4 different things you could do power wise with an SVS sub. You could push the rocker button down by the power plug, and that is completely cut off the power. That's the same as unplugging it, is the rocker button. Then there's the oh wait, do they even have the power push button anymore? Because the new ones have the 3 buttons. So I can't remember.
I don't know.
I can't remember if they have the power push button anymore, because that used to be a full off. And I guess there might be like the tiniest bit of current still going through the power supply, but that used to be a full off. But then there's the auto standby, right? That's the way to put it into standby mode, is with the auto setting, so that, when it is not detecting a signal anymore after, I think it's 15 minutes of detecting no signal, it goes into low power mode. And at that point, I think it's 0.3 of a watt that it's doing there in standby. But if you put the power switch in the on position at all times, essentially the subwoofer is sitting idle, not standby. It draws right around 7 watts. Right around 7 watts is the power draw on there, with it powered on but not playing anything. So, is 7 watts at all times acceptable to you? That's most LED light bulbs these days are about that range, around 7 to 10 watts.
They don't have a picture of the back panel that I can easily find on their website, so I can't tell you if that button exists.
It's about 7 watts.
So when he uses AirPlay to send audio from his iPhone to his Marantz SR8015 receiver, is there any difference if he controls the volume by changing it on his iPhone rather than using the Marantz remote? So whenever I do this, I always max out the volume on the phone and control it with the receiver, unless I notice some sort of distortion that I'm hearing. But like with Bluetooth in my car and stuff like that, the Bluetooth is always set up to max, and I control the volume.
But have you been using AirPlay, or was that Bluetooth?
That's Bluetooth.
Okay,
I have not used AirPlay.
Because Bluetooth, you max out the source device, you max out the phone when it's Bluetooth, and then control it with the volume on the playback device. But AirPlay, when I've used it, it's bi-directional. It actually changes the volume slider on the AV receiver when you change the volume on the phone, and vice versa. It's
I don't have an iPhone, so
it's two-way communication. So in my experience, it's been two-way communication when actually using AirPlay, not Bluetooth. AirPlay, and therefore it doesn't matter. You change the volume on one, it changes the volume on the other, and therefore you can switch back and forth if you wanted to, and it's going to be the same on both devices. That's been my experience with AirPlay on an iPhone, anyway.
All right, when he powers on either his LG CX OLED or his Marantz, his Panasonic UB820 powers on too. Is there some way to turn that off? He's using HDMI ARC from his OLED, so that seems to be necessitate keeping HDMI-CEC. Of course, LG calls it Simp Link because that's a lot more understandable. And he's got to keep that turned on for that. There's got to be a way to do that for sure.
Oh, yes, because what he wants is HDMI audio return channel.
Right.
So he is correct.
Which I don't think you need to turn all the rest of it on, right? Can't you just turn on the ARC?
Yeah, so in the television, he's correct. You've got to have the HDMI-CEC active so that HDMI audio return channel works. But in your Marantz, you do not. In your Marantz, you can separate between the control part of things, and Marantz actually labels it as HDMI control versus HDMI audio return channel. That can be turned on independent of the control part of CEC in the Marantz. So that's the one where you need to go into the Marantz's setup menu, go to the video section, and under there is the HDMI setup. And under HDMI setup in the Marantz, you can turn off HDMI control, but turn HDMI audio return channel just by itself. Just that part you turn on. The other thing you do is check, because he must also have HDMI-CEC turned on in his Panasonic Ultra HD Blu-ray player, if that is responding to HDMI-CEC commands. So there you will want to look for Viera Link, because Panasonic calls HDMI-CEC Viera Link, because everybody has to have their own name for it. So that'll be, I don't actually know the Panasonic player's menus off the top of my head, but that'll be in the menu somewhere, some mention of Viera Link, and turn that off, and that should settle this issue for you.
All right, good. His Marantz remote has 4 buttons on it labeled Smart Select. What are those for? Any tips on the best way to use them? Are those macros? I feel like those are macros.
They're not exactly macros. They are, okay. So you choose a particular input, right? Whatever the input you want to use on your Marantz. You choose whether Odyssey is on or off. You choose whether dynamic EQ and dynamic volume are on and off. You choose what listening mode you want to use. And then you can save all of that under one of the 4 Smart Select buttons. Then on the remaining Smart Select buttons, you could choose a different input entirely and all of that setup, or it might be the case that you choose the very same input, but now one is Odyssey on versus Odyssey off, or one is Odyssey is on in both cases, but just dynamic volume is on one of them, or dynamic volume is off on the other. That type of thing. It's that collection of options. You choose the full setup, and then you can save that configuration to one of those 4 smart selects, and that lets you choose. So instead of having to go in the menu and turn off a particular feature, like let's say Odyssey Dynamic Volume, right? Maybe you want to use Dynamic Volume late at night, but not the rest of the time. So instead of having to go in the menu and manually turn that on or off, you could have one configuration that has it on and one configuration that has it off under your smart select buttons. So that's what those are for.
All right. So we'd like to get an inexpensive, $100 Canadian or less, UPS battery backup just for his modem, router, and NAS. It doesn't have to have a super long battery life. Do we have any suggestions?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I bought for my router, and I mean, I bought it for the router and the modem, basically. I don't think it was over $100 American, so I don't know what it would be, but it was, one of the back UPS from APCs, which you can get from Amazon, and those things take like no power.
Yeah.
So, I still have internet for like 20-30 minutes after the power goes out now.
Yep, that's exactly what he's looking for too. Yeah. So Amazon Canada, because he's in Canada, and I'd point you to the APC back UPS BE600. They're currently on the M1 version, but the BE600, it's $80 Canadian, and it's got 5 battery backup outlets and 2 surge only. But he only mentioned 3 devices he needs to plug in and have batteries, so that should be fine. It's actually got decent spacing on it, where you can actually have a wall wart plugged into some of the battery backups and not overlap the outlets, so that one checks all the boxes. I'd recommend it in a heartbeat. It's, anything with a battery in it. It's not teeny tiny, but it's not oversized either. So I think that'll do the job very nicely for the price you wanted.
All right. Nathan just moved, and sadly that meant losing his dedicated theater, but in the new place, he's setting up a system in the guest bedroom. So that's probably going to be pretty small. He won't have full light control. He wouldn't be able to keep a fixed frame projection screen on the wall at all times, so he'd have to switch to a roll down screen. And while the room could fit a 110-inch screen size, he wouldn't have the necessary throw distance to keep using his JVC projector. Oh my God. This is a bedroom, right? So it's got to be like 10 by 11 or 11 by 12 or something like that. Yeah, I mean, if you can't put 110 inches up on the screen, that's a small room.
Like the screen will fit, but the throw distance isn't there.
So bottom line, if he were to stick with projecting, he'd need to buy all new stuff. And it's never going to be pitch black in this room anyway, so he is gasped considering a flat panel. I don't want to gasp at that. I'd be like, ooh, I'm considering a flat panel.
This sounds like a room that it makes sense to have a flat panel.
It's going to be hard to go back from a huge projection screen, but it seems like for this room, it probably makes the most sense. He could afford a 77-inch OLED, but that would max out his budget. There seem to be quite a few 85-inch LCD options these days, and some of them are downright affordable. So his top priorities are contrast and black levels. It doesn't need the highest-end gaming features, and a bonus would be if it's available from Costco. So what do we suggest? First of all, okay, I had this conversation with Clint like 2 weeks ago, and I said, I said, you are like a lot of people out there, because I was talking to Clint. You are like a lot of people out there. You don't look at how big of a screen do I need. You look at how big of a screen will fit. Then you get that. He goes, that is 100% what I do. The man has to take Dramamine in his theater if he wants to play a first-person shooter, or I'm not joking.
Right.
He takes Dramamine on the regular if he's going to play a video game or if he's going to watch a highly motion-y action movie.
Michael Bay.
So, he sits way too close to his screen. So I asked him to calculate his field of view so I could make fun of him, but he didn't do it yet. But Nathan, you seem to be in the same camp. Now, first of all, I think that you're going to find, especially if you can go with the OLED, I think you're going to find that you're going to go to this to a direct view TV like this and find that you're not going to miss that projector all that much. Not as much as you think you are. The raw number of inches diagonal the screen is less important than the field of view.
Yes.
And if you get the same field of view that you had before or similar, it's going to feel the same. But now you're going to be able to have, especially OLED, better black levels, higher contrast, HDR,
Oh, and then in
Dolby
a room
Vision.
that isn't fully light controlled, there's zero contest.
Yes, there's zero contest there. But even if it was fully light controlled, you would still end up with, I think, a better overall image than what you, and that's just where we are right now with projectors and direct view TVs. A couple of years ago, that was not the case. The TVs and the projectors images were very similar, and some had advantages over the other, but you could get a much bigger screen. But you aren't going to need this. What you need to do is figure out how far away your eye is going to be from this screen, and then get that field of view. Now, if that means 77 or 75 or it's not going to be 65, 75, then you can lower your, you can get save some money that way. But just getting the biggest screen that you can possibly afford or put on this wall, is often a recipe for disaster. So make sure that you are getting the field of view you need, and not the biggest screen that you can afford.
The other factor with a flat panel is that the TV does not have to be mounted on the wall. You can put it on a TV stand or get a 3-in-1 stand where it looks like it's mounted on something, but it's movable because it's on a stand. And now you can have a smaller screen size, but it is closer to you. And that very well could be an option. So
and don't forget that you can sell that JVC and recoup some of this money. So
there is absolutely that. Yeah. So I like the 77-inch OLEDs because you can still find some of the C10s from last year, and the 77-inch is under $3,000 now. I'm like, oh man, 77-inch OLED for under $3,000. That's real tempting. There is an 83-inch OLED on the way. So if it really is, you work out what the distance is going to be, and you work out what you want the field of view to be, and you're like, it's got to be over 80 inches to make sense. That could be the case. It depends on the size of your room and where you're sitting. But there is an 83-inch OLED on the way. Its list price, the C1 83-inch OLED, that's going to be the least expensive version of it, is $6,000 listed. It's actually on Costco.com for $5,800 today. So that's as the day of recording. Prices fluctuate a bit, but that's where it is now. He was looking more in the under $3,000 price range. So that is sort of doubling the budget, but it does exist. Sony has an 83-inch coming out as well, but that's going to be $8,000, and they're not here yet. Now, he mentioned Costco, and Costco sells the Vizio P Quantum X 85-inch model. Normally, they have it listed at $2,900. Today, the day we're recording this, Monday the 21st, they have it listed at $2,500. And that is a heck of a deal for a full array local dimming, 792 zones of it local dimming. Super bright. It does all the gaming features, HDMI 2.1 stuff that he said he doesn't even need. But for that price for 85 inches, that's really hard to beat. So if it is purely about screen size, I'm almost certainly going to point you there. Walmart sells it as well. They also have it for $2,500 today, although they charge $50 of shipping. Amazon sometimes carries it, but they're sold out, as I'm checking it today, of the Vizio P Quantum X 85-inch. Now, when it comes to 85-inch LCDs, about the only other one I would probably recommend is Sony's 85-inch. Now they're on to the X91J. That's going to be the model. It's part of the X90 series, but for some reason, the 85-incher gets a slightly different number as an X91J. Costco does sell that, the 85-inch version, for $3,000. So I would probably, if it's all about screen size, I'd hop on that Vizio. I'm all about that P Quantum X Vizio. But if there is a way to OLED, I'd get the OLED.
Yeah. John from the Philippines. First up, John has the theater where the constant humidity in the Philippines is causing what he thought to be mold growth on the wooden columns in his theater. And we've got some pictures that you'll see on YouTube where if I had taken these pictures, every single picture would have had the little stormtrooper helmet in different positions. I would have just kept moving it. It just shows up like the girl from The Ring.
Okay. I love the look of this theater. I love the stretch fabric. I love the wood columns. Gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a very good, really nice theater. He had it checked, and we were correct. It's actually mildew, not mold. He'll still need to address the humidity situation with alterations to his HVAC, but for now, he feels a little bit better about just cleaning it right away. And so he's got a question, though, or maybe more than one. I don't know. I haven't scrolled that far down. He already owned a single SVS PB1000, and he recently added 2 PB1000 Pros for a total of 3 subs in the room. The room is roughly 12 by 18 by 8. Holy crap. Okay, so, and it's fully enclosed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a lot.
But he's got him.
Sorry. He decided to try an approach similar to the Earl Geddes method with his 3 subwoofers. The placement of his front speakers and his cabinets that house his disc collection limited his option for replacement. He wound up with 1 sub on the front wall, in between his front left and right tower and his center. Front left tower and his center. The second sub was on the right side wall, about a quarter of the room's length from the front, and the third sub is in the middle of the back wall. He used a mini DSP by 4 HD to individually EQ each sub and tried to get them as uniform as possible across his 3 main seats. Then he used the Odyssey Editor app to create a desired target curve, a gradual rise in the bass response the lower it goes, and applied that as though he only had 1 sub. So, yeah. The whole process involved measuring and remeasuring with Room EQ Wizard. Throughout, he spent a solid couple of days. Yeah. So we'd like to know what we think of his final measured results. I'm going to already say they're great, just because I don't want you to have to do it again. He measured the 3 seats across his 3-seat couch. The lines do not perfectly overlap, but from 80 hertz on down, he's within a plus or minus 5 dB window. And that Anthony Grimandi, whatever, has said that it's perfectly acceptable.
Where do these extra L's come from?
I don't know.
D's.
Grimaldi sounds more like
There's no L or D.
I don't care. I don't care. You're just making DJ drink more.
That's the
idea. That's what you're doing, right? Does he need to do more? Aim for either further improvement? If so, how we go about doing so? I
could just say, no, you don't need to aim for further
improvement. You don't do anything else.
But that doesn't really help educate anybody about what's going on. But yes, that is the short answer.
Where's the back? Oh, the back one is in the middle of the back wall. Okay, I see it now.
Yes. Yeah.
And then there's
2 more subs if you're looking at the front there. It should be just above here. There's just pictures.
Yeah,
just above
I see it.
So there's one on the right-hand wall. It's about a quarter of the room's length from the front, and then there's a third sub that is in between his front left tower and his center speaker.
I really just want him to get rid of that. I mean, I'll be honest with you. If it were me, I would just get rid of the SB1000, keep the 2 PB1000s or whatever.
Well, they were all PB, but get rid of the original PB1000 and just have 2 PB1000 Pros.
Yes, and then there's no world I believe that sub up at the front of the room can't fit behind that center channel.
Behind the center speaker?
Yeah.
So that's the middle of the front wall, middle of the back wall?
Well, or just move the one in the back.
Slightly off center to match whatever the off center of the front sub is, yeah.
Right. So I don't think you can put it in the right corner because you got your gear back there. But if you moved it to the left of your room and then swapped your subwoofer at the front of the room so that it was where your helmet is.
Right.
Then you would basically have and then you won't have to do any of the stuff that you already did, but you already did it. So
you already did it.
Just, I mean, if you had come to us first, I would say get rid of the 1000, keep the 2 Pros, place them properly, run Odyssey, enjoy.
Yeah, because he is in an enclosed rectangular room. So, like, where the 3 subwoofer Earl Geddes approach or, the brute force approach of, essentially trial and error sound field management or using the multi-sub optimizer, which definitely works best once you have 3 or 4 subwoofers, not just 2. Like, where all of those make the most sense is in a room that is either not rectangular, not enclosed, or you simply cannot position your subwoofers across the room from each other. If you're in any of those scenarios, these 3 or 4 subwoofer approaches make a ton of sense. But when you're in an enclosed rectangle, you can make your life easier. You just put the subs across the room from each other, so that if you drew a straight line from sub to sub, it would go right through the middle point of your room, the line would. So, spin the subs around so they end up in diagonal opposite corners or middles of the 2 walls, or if it's slightly offset from center on opposing walls, then one is a little to the left of the front wall and the other is a little to the right of the back wall, or vice versa. You do those things and you should end up with some pretty good results in a enclosed rectangular room. Now, he's done this. Whether he wants to do any more setup and measuring, I wouldn't blame him if he didn't, because the results that he got are really good looking results. Are they perfectly overlapping lines? No. Above 80 hertz, is there a little divergence where his right seat has a bit of a dip at 90 and 100 hertz? Yes, that exists. I know that looks scarier than perfectly overlapping lines, but you've got really good results. You've got no big dips, no big peaks, and the only places where they even start to diverge a little bit is up into the crossover region, where the contribution of the speakers now is going to start to play into this as well. So I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't touch it.
Not only that, but he did his three main seats, which I'm guessing is this front row.
I'm guessing
I'm guessing he put them he measured smack dab in the middle of all those seats.
Yeah.
Which is harder to evenly calibrate than it is if you follow the recommendations of 18 inches to 2 feet, radius around the thing. So, I think you've got great results. You could keep everything the way you have it. And be perfectly fine.
Yes.
If you want to keep filling, you can. I don't see why you would. Or you could do what we just said, which is just get rid of one of the subs, place the other two subs slightly differently than what you currently have them at, and then be done. And not have done all this. But you've already done it. So if you're happy with what you've got and you don't want to sell anything, you don't want to adjust anything, then you're fine. But if you ever decide to make a change, rather than having to go through this whole process again, you could sell the mini DSP, sell the one sub, and go with just placing them.
The only other thing I would say is step away from the visual of the graphs and measurements and play a sweep. Play a sweep and listen to the sweep. And if the sweep sounds as though, to your human ears, which are not as precise as that U-Mic 1, if that sweep sounds nice and even, then you're done.
Yeah. All right, Lance. I hate that I always say all right before we talk about the next thing. Lance wanted to clarify about his reasons for ultimately putting his dual PC12 Plus cylinder subs in the two front corners of his room after we tried our suggestion for putting them in the midpoints of the two side walls. I thought we already agreed that this was fine and we didn't have to talk about this anymore.
It is, but he wanted to clarify, so I'm happy to oblige.
Okay, so this is the yellow room.
It is the yellow room with the pitched ceiling. Yeah.
And pitched ceiling, and it's got a lot of room treatments, but not a lot of room to the sides of the couch. And he's got cylinder subs, and we suggested him move them forward, and he did, and he said it sounded better, but he was able to move them back to where they were at the front of the room and still get a relatively good result, and he was happy with what he got, so he was going to leave them up there.
That's right.
So he says it wasn't just for aesthetics or even walkway reasons. After trying SVS's suggestions of running them in sealed mode, and SVS sending him the port plugs for free so that he could do so, he found that with the sidewall placement, they did start to gradually roll off around 40 hertz. That was totally that was totally expected for sealed subs, but he didn't want to give up on any of the deepest bass output, so putting them in the corners reinforced the deepest bass, and since he wound up with such good results across his front three seats and much better response in the back row versus when the subs were ported, he's very happy with this alignment. He's still surprised at the difference it made putting the subs in sealed mode. So on to a different topic.
Yes.
Lance would like to hear our thoughts on where we think Hollywood movies are headed in terms of actual storylines. Well, if Corella's in the indication, they're just going to say some stupid stuff, and we're all just supposed to go along with it like that's how things work in the real world. Because that was one dumb movie.
Okay. I haven't seen it yet.
I have not predicted, so the pregnant pause thing where they pause before they say something.
Sure.
Harry and the Hendersons, I was sitting in the movie theater, and every time somebody did that, I predicted what they were going to say. Okay. And not only that, I predicted what the next thing that was going to happen in the movie. And I was sitting with some friends and not a lot of people, and I was doing it out loud, and everybody was like, Jesus God, you got to stop. Just stop. That was the same thing as last night. Last night, it was just constantly me going, they're not serious. Oh, nope, they did that.
Okay.
That's what they're doing. Was not super impressed with that movie.
It
was a beautiful movie to look at, and I love Emma Stone and Emma Thompson. So it was well done. I mean, they were just chewing up the furniture, with these parts, but...
So the production quality was not the problem.
Was not the problem. The writing.
Oh dear.
I mean, Cruella is not much of a character to begin. She was like if you remember the original 101 Dalmatians, she's like a shark. She just tours the countryside in her car trying to find these puppies, and that's all she does. It's not. Ugh.
She was very much a one-dimensional villain in the cartoon, and that was fine because that was the point, and it was entertaining for someone to be that one-dimensional.
Mm-hmm. But trying to give her depth was just like,
All right.
okay. Anyways, so actual story. He's feeling a growing concern because it seems to him that movies in general are becoming ever more formulaic. He still enjoys the latest blockbusters, but where are the movies that take chances to do something unique and different? In his mind, from the 80s to the 2000s, there were always at least a handful of movies every year that felt different. But in recent years, the trend seems to be for everything to feel the same. How do we think that will affect the home theater hobby, and where do we think things are headed? I think that every person, as they grow older, looks back and thinks to themselves, things were better.
There's definitely that
younger.
part of the factor, yes.
There are tons of indie movies and smaller movies that come out all the time. I'll just throw out a couple that, some of my great loves. A Quiet Place, The Descent. These were not blockbuster movies. You could even look at things like Dark City, which is, of course, an older movie, and The Fifth Element, which I don't think was a huge...
You're going back a few years, though, to stuff that you're talking about?
I am. I mean,
Parasite, Parasite won
yes.
Best Picture, and that was a different story, but, foreign film, so it wasn't
just
out
about
of
everything
Hollywood.
Jordan Peele has made in the last couple of years
yeah.
has been, definitely taking chances with different formulas. I mean, the hero's journey, which is the formula, like everything goes by, you just keep waiting for the pulling defeat from the jaws of victory, which happens like in every single one of these Marvel movies and everything else. I mean, it's a formula because it works. It's engaging. Sure. It can be done very, very well.
On the movies where they're spending $200-300 million now just to make it, and then double that for the marketing budget, when it's those types of movies, they aren't going to take any chances. They're like, this has to hit all 4 quadrants. It is written by committee. And they're fortunate in Marvel's case to have someone like Kevin Feige, who has done a very good job of overseeing the whole thing and keeping that whole thing running. And then when someone like DC tries to copy it, they have struggled. They haven't been able to copy that. So it's not like there's no skill in producing a multi-$100 million movie that does manage to bring in massive box office. But I get absolutely what he's talking about, where it does all start to feel a bit the same. And yes, we do have a gazillion sequels and a gazillion remakes, although that's
been happening for years.
The version of The Wizard of Oz that everybody knows, that was a remake. So it's not anything new.
Shh, don't tell them. Don't tell people.
It's not new to do stuff that already worked in the past.
And then I think there's also the sort of the bias that comes in from having a home theater, if that makes sense. So, like when all you had was a TV, or you rented videos from Blockbuster or whatever. You never chose something based on how it was going to sound, right? You just chose it, or how it was going to even look. Really, you chose it based on the cover art and maybe the description or something like that, because the experience at home was always kind of the same. You could barely, you could hear it. Kind of, and you could see it, and that was basically what you had. Nowadays, is that how you shop for movies? Do you shop for movies based on plot and storyline and cover art? No, you're like, I want to make sure it has Atmos, and I want to make sure it supports HDR or Dolby Vision, and I want to, I want it to be loud, and I want it to be bombastic and stuff. So there's that goes into it as well.
I think there's also just the factor of, as you, a person, age and have more experience, having heard and seen more stories, you start recognizing that, a bunch of this stuff is recycled from older stories. Well, stuff that was, I don't know Lance's age, but stuff that was new to you and exciting and seemed really creative when, I don't know, maybe you were in your teens or 20s or something. There was a whole group of people about 20 or 30 years older than you who are like, this is a recycle of something I saw in
I've just totally seen 50s, this movie before, 60s, except it was Bogart or whatever. I had somebody tell me, like, okay, so my son is... So about 15 years ago, I had this girl that was working for me. She was, probably 18, 19 years old. And it was when I first started really working online and writing online. I needed somebody to watch the kids. And I had like a 1 or 2 year old and whatever. That was right when my third son was born. So maybe it was like 14 years ago. And she told me, straight face, that Lady Gaga was like the most innovative singer that has ever lived. I was like, yeah, so Madonna, this is like, Lady Gaga is like your Madonna, all right? Sure. She's not doing anything
And
new
you know
that
what? They're
anybody
both
else has done. They are both great. They are both great. And not only that, you could look back and I'm sure there's somebody like 30 years older than me is like, oh, what about Shirley Temple or something? I don't know. I mean, somebody.
I wouldn't go to that one, but yeah.
Yeah, there's somebody back there who was like breaking all the stereotypes and pushing all the boundaries and making, Elvis, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, Elvis did things in the Beatles as well.
Also, Elvis was just covering a whole bunch of music that wasn't his own. So
that is also true. So, I mean, as you get older, you start to see these same storylines be recycled over and over again. So and it's not like it just comes with age.
Yeah.
So
yeah, because if you have a kid and you show them a movie that just came out this year or last year, they don't have that whole historical background. To them, it's new and it's exciting and it's innovative. So,
right. I showed my kid, my son Jaws, and he's like, this is dumb. I'm like, he's like, it's not even scary. I'm like, you don't understand. When this movie came out, there had never been anything like this before.
Right.
This was the first big blockbuster, scary monster movie that had come out in decades, from like, since they had color, it was all slasher flicks before this. So, I mean, that's not totally true, but you know what I'm saying. It made a big impact on me, and he just doesn't get it, which is fine, but I actually showed him The Ring, and he felt the same way about The Ring. The Ring scared the Jesus out of me.
Yeah, I mean, that seemed very innovative to me at the first time that I saw it. So, yeah.
So there's always going to be, during every couple of years or whatever, there's always going to be somebody who's going to break out and come out with a new idea and look at things in a different way. Now, are they 100% original? Every story that's ever been told has already been told. All right, we're just recycling
really
these
only
things.
A couple of truly original storylines that have been used for a very, very long time and just told in different ways. But the last point I want to make on this is I do think we're seeing right now, and this might start to wane just because of oversaturation, but television and streaming series. Like a lot of people have mentioned, the movies are the director's medium and television is the writer's medium.
Yeah.
And where we're seeing some more interesting, haven't seen it before storytelling is in television. And those are getting good production budgets, really high production value. And we've got so many of them now. There's a gazillion things you haven't seen, Lance. There's no chance that you've seen it all because there's just not enough time in the day to watch everything I want to watch, let alone stuff that I don't even know about, which also exists. So it's there. It does exist. I actually think there is more hope as a home theater person consuming this stuff because you can access all the streaming services. Yeah. So I'm not really afraid.
When there was only 3 networks or even when cable came out and there were a lot more, but there just wasn't that much opportunity to innovate all that much, and now that we have Netflix who will throw money at anybody.
Yep. And HBO's doing it too because they want to compete and...
Yeah, we're now starting to see some really interesting shows. Now, the thing
FX
that's irritating everybody is that these shows get like 2-3 seasons and they get canceled because they're no longer generating the buzz, and that's all that Netflix really cares about. They don't care about.
But
all
they're
the rest
still
of that
like
stuff.
They're cool for the one season that they had. There's some fun stuff in there.
So yeah, for example, I am I want to say rewatching, but not really. But I got like 2.5 through maybe 2.5 seasons of A Good Place before my family started watching it without me. So I gave up and just and they finished it, and I didn't finish it. So I started watching The Good Place again because I've been watching it in the last week. But Friday, my youngest son left like his shoes right outside our back door that goes into our garage, and it's a big step down. It's like higher than a normal step. So I stepped down, I hit his shoe, and I rolled my whole foot.
Oh, geez.
I mean, I heard crunching. I thought I had broken my ankle or something. So I've been laid up all Father's Day weekend with my foot elevated and icing and all this other stuff. It's fine. I'm going to be fine. The swelling has gone down. It's just now painful, but it's not all puffed up anymore. But I've been sitting there rewatching The Good Place, and in every episode I'm like, I can't believe this show's so good.
Right?
How is this show so good? It is so good, and it's like I just hope. I haven't gotten to the last season yet. I think that they ended it on purpose, which is what I'm really hoping for, so that they. It's not like a cliffhanger, but
is not.
I am just loving every minute of that show. And there's so many shows out there that are like that.
Yeah.
Schitt's Creek, if you haven't seen that, I'm sorry, Apple, whatever. This is not
SCHIIT
cursing. Okay. But that's a great show. I hated the first 5 or 6 episodes because I thought the people were just despicable. But as my wife made me watch more of it, I started to really like it, and now we're watching it for a second time. But there's so many good shows out there, and like Rob's saying, if all you're looking for is blockbuster movies to innovate, then you're going to be waiting for a long time. If you think about the movies that really kind of blew your mind, they're few and far between when they're like that, and a lot of times they were smaller budgets that ended up being blockbusters. But
now those are coming to the streaming services.
Yeah.
The smaller budget movies are coming to the streaming services. So once again, I think home theater is the place to be.
It is. Dazz. First up, Dazz wanted to mention that even though his theater is in the basement, he's in Georgia, and the basement is a walkout, so it actually has full height windows. Okay. Weird, but okay. All right. So you live in a hobbit hole, as far as I'm concerned. Whatever. We said that as long as he doesn't mind having an acoustic panel over the window, we'd go for it if it means having symmetry with the other side wall. So he was thinking he'd use picture wire in front of the blinds, but behind the curtains, and hang a panel over the window that way. The blinds would keep the panel invisible from the outside, from outside the house, and the curtains would cover the panel from the view from the inside the room. Do we think that'd be okay? What? So hang a panel over the window. The blinds would keep the panel invisible from. Okay. Yes. Okay. So this is sort of how my home theater is, if that makes sense. So I have blinds in my windows, and the screen that's behind me right now is in front of those blinds. Okay? So you can't see that there's a screen, and there's also blackout curtains on another window. And yes, I think that would work just fine.
Yeah, sounds like a plan to me.
Yeah, the picture hanging method is very nice. If you go to AV Gadgets, I talk about how I'll walk you through how to hang them, and also get some rubber insulation tape so that you can put it at the corners of your panel to make sure that if it vibrates on the wall, it'll be decoupled and all that. But it is there. Dazz recently landed new employment. Congratulations. The company works for specializes in business IT, but they also get some AV requests from clients from time to time. They've got a gymnasium project where the clients want a projection screen for the stage. They already have a 122-inch retractable tab tension rear projection screen.
220-inch.
What did I say, 120?
You said 122, which is something
okay.
different. 220.
That's not the right thing. 220-inch retractable tab tension rear projection screen. There won't be full light control. Dazz, and of course they're not. There'd never be full light control.
Not in a gym, no.
But it also sits in a black box, you know. So it's gonna. There is some,
that's
it's
why
dark
rear projection
around it.
makes sense.
Yeah. Dazz would like to be prepared to offer them a projector recommendation. So do we have any suggestions for that? But the main task for him will be scouting the location and physically installing the projector once it's chosen. The idea is for the retractable screen to be mounted close to the front of the stage. So any thoughts about how the projector might be situated somewhere behind the screen and how that might inform the choice of projector model itself? So we've got a picture here just of the front of this thing.
Yep. It's a gym. There's a stage. It's exactly what you're picturing in your mind.
So, I mean, in most projectors, if you line it up at the top or the bottom, it can usually project the image you want. So what you need, and I'm sure Rob will have some suggestions for you here, or within the top, I guess, within a third, within that. If it were me, I would want to place the pie just to keep people away from it, and put it over those lights that are in the back there. But on that back wall, on a shelf or something that you could build or install. This doesn't seem like it's going to be that big of an issue, unless you want to do something fancy where it drops down on a
motorized projector drop. Yeah, those do exist, certainly. But I had a few thoughts about this because, first of all, I mean, the client already bought the screen, so I hope they bought a rear projection screen, because you can't just take a regular white projection screen and rear project onto it. It does need to be a rear projection screen, but as long as they mention that to whatever vendor they went with, they're certainly easily available. Almost all rear projection screens do have high gain, usually like a 2.1 2.0 or higher gains, so that helps with the ambient light situation. And of course, the light is coming from behind, so as long as it's dark behind the screen, and then you have this rear projection screen with the gain, that usually is all right, and that shouldn't be a problem. I would definitely say DLP for sure. I wouldn't look at anything else because you want a sealed light path. You're going to have the opportunity for dust and whatnot to get in, and plus maintenance ideas. So DLP for sure. Laser light engine would be preferable because that means a longer life and less dimming over time. But in terms of exactly where it goes, I was actually thinking some stage productions, they want the ability to cast shadows. Like, I don't... Sometimes that's what they actually want, right? They want the to be able to have the performers in between the projector and the screen so that they can intentionally cast shadows. So I don't know if that's what they want. It might be something that you want to ask them, because that's going to determine whether you want the projector mounted low or high. Now, my instinct is that you're going to want it mounted high so that it's out of the way. People can walk beneath it without casting shadows. That's my instinct. If that's the case, I would go with a short throw. Because for a 220-inch screen, if it's a standard throw projector, the projector's lens is going to be somewhere in the vicinity of 20 to 40 feet behind the screen if it's standard throw. Whereas if you go with short throw, now the lens of the projector can be from 12 to 14 feet. It definitely looks like you have at least 12 to 14 feet in this stage. It looks like you have over 20 feet to work with. Yeah, it looks that way.
It's hard to tell.
But you for sure have 12 feet to work with. And if it's short throw, then it can be mounted on an extension above, like basically so the lens will be about in line with the top of the screen when the screen comes down. And people will be able to walk underneath it on the stage without casting shadows. So a little bit depends on whether or not they want to. I would probably try to avoid HDMI because it's going to be a very long HDMI run, and that informs the projector model I'm going to suggest. And then if you're looking at just how many lumens can I get out, as soon as you target 8,000 or more in the lumen count, the price on projectors just skyrockets. Everything goes over $10,000 as soon as you target that. But you can get 7,000 or 7,500 for the $5,000 to $6,000 range, as long as you're willing to go with basically HD resolution instead of 4K. Most of them are the WUXGA resolution. That's a 16 by 10. It's 1920 by 1200 instead of 1920 by 1080. But almost all of them are that in this sort of price range and lumen output. So, bearing the lead, but the one I would recommend to you is from Optima. It's their ZU 720, even though it's not a 720 resolution projector. That's just the model number. It is this WUXGA resolution, but the ZU 720T, and then there's that ZU 720T or the ZU 720T ST. ST standing for short throw. So the short throw lens actually makes the price higher. It's $5,000 for the standard throw, $6,000 for the short throw. But it's got all the things you want. It's DLP, 7,000 lumens, laser light engine, short throw or standard throw, your choice. And then it also has HD-based already built in.
Right.
So you can
that'll make
connect.
things easier.
You can connect the HDMI signal to an Ethernet cable, which is going to be way easier in a gym, and that's already built in. 4-corner keystone correction if you do happen to need to tilt it in any way and you need to correct the keystone. Motorized lens for everything, so once you have it up there, you can adjust it after the fact. And oh boy, is that nice for a gymnasium projector. So I think it checks all the boxes. I don't know if their budget is going up to $5,000 or $6,000, but there's not much better for less.
Well, so this will give you enough information to either make a recommendation or ask the right question, so that you know what do
it's
they want to be able to project?
Point if nothing else. Yeah,
the shadow thing is going to be. I know that some people would like to do that every once in a while, but I would highly recommend that they not try to use their projector to do that.
You also have the option of taking the projector off the mount and putting it on a table if there's a performance that requires it. There's nothing stopping it.
Or just putting a big freaking light back there. I mean, like a really bright LED, spotlight and shining it on that screen and have people walk in front of it. I mean, that is way easier and more convenient than trying to have a projector that's low enough or that you want to remove every once in a while. No one should be removed this projector ever. So no one should touch it. But it should give you, do you have to have 4K? They're going to say no. How bright do you need it to be? You're going to have a conversation with them about that, and then talk about sight lines and making sure, if you keep it high, people can walk underneath it and they'll be fine. But if you put it low, then you can do the shadow thing, but I don't recommend it, and here's why. So that should get you going with a conversation.
I think so.
Slate, the magazine? Anyways, Slate is putting a home theater in his bonus room. The dimensions are 15.5 by 22 by 10. He's well aware that we normally say to avoid in-wall speakers if possible, but for the plans he has in mind, it's got to be an acoustically transparent screen up front with the front 3 speakers all hidden behind it. The primary row is going to be around 15 feet from the screen. He plans to go with some outlaw audio amps for power. Well, clearly he's thinking about this in the right order. He's got the screen and the amps. Don't worry about the rest
15 feet
of it.
away, though, that sounds reasonable to have amps. Yeah.
Probably. The proposed budget is about $750 each for the front 3 speakers. The system is for movies. He'll have dual subs, front wall and back wall, and he wants a neutral sound. So via online research, he's looked at RBH, Axiom, KEF, Price Monolith, Outdoor Speaker Depot, and even Speakercraft. Not Speakercraft. Take them off your list. Thank you. Take them off your list. Thank you. But he wants to get it right the first time, so what do we suggest?
There are two that really stand out to me out of this list.
Yeah, obviously, yes. The RBH and the KEF are the two that stand up for me. You might say Monoprice, but I don't see why.
I would say the Monolith, because the Monolith are THX Ultra certified 3-way in-wall speakers, and affordable. They're actually less than the price that he spec'd, and have all the specs that he needs in terms of efficiency and power handling to be very appropriate at 15 feet. So that one is definitely in there. It might even end up being my top choice is the Monoprice Monolith, just in this case because of price.
So I've got a couple of questions for you, and I know that first of all, we are not against in-wall speakers, and I mean as a rule, what we are against is things that are hard to fix if they don't work. So
one thing we are against is your front 3 speakers being in ceiling. We are against that, but you're not proposing that. He's proposing in-wall behind an acoustically transparent screen, and I'm okay with that.
That's fine. The thing I would say, though, is are you sure you can put them where you think you can put them? Because this is the thing that we run into all the time with in-wall and in-ceiling speakers, is that people are like, I can put one there, there, and there. It'll fit perfectly. And then they go and... Wait a second.
There's a pipe or a wire.
A wire, a pipe, a stud, a something. It's an it's an air return channel.
Right.
It's all sorts of things that can go back there. So before you start buying speakers and drawing squares on your wall as to where they're going to be, you need to make sure that they can actually go there. And if you are dead set on having this really clean look up front, which I am perfectly okay with, a false wall would make it so that you could do whatever you want up there.
Yeah, because I mean, he's not building a tiny room. He's got a room that's 22 feet long. You could have a false wall.
You could take 3 feet of that and put a false wall in front of it, and then
3 feet,
and then take. Well, I mean, I'm just saying, if he wants to put a subwoofer back there and everything else,
that's ideally. But I mean, you could do it with as little as 18 inches. That can be done.
So then you could have bookshelf speakers or even tower speakers back there, or high efficiency bookshelf speakers, still be sitting 14, 13 feet away from these things. And
there is that. It's to be considered, but
it would make your life a lot easier. Let's put it to you that way.
Right. But taking it as rote, I mean, I would certainly see if you've got an RBH dealer in your area.
Yes.
For the price that he talked about, you probably can't get to the Signature series, but they have their VM series, their Visage M series. They are great. For the distances you're talking about, I would point you to the VM616 out of that lineup, but that'll be under $750 each. You can get the RBH backer boxes for them, or build your own to the same specification. But yeah, that one, again, it's got just the right efficiency and power handling for the distance that you're talking about. But yeah, that RBH VM616, probably my top choice. And being that they're all behind the screen and hidden, it can be 3 of them vertical. There's no reason why one of them needs to be horizontal and look like a horizontal center. No, they can all be vertical the way we would want them, all at ear level, all behind your screen. So that's probably my top choice. But yeah, the Monoprice Monolith, that is right up there for me. Because that's the THX.
It's a 3-way. It's got tweeter mid-range, and then 2 woofers, then kind of I mean, it's not really an MTM, but it
No,
kind of has that sort of configuration.
Tweeter mid-range stack and then woofers on either side of that.
Right.
But yeah, THX Ultra certified. I mean, to get THX Ultra certification, it's not nothing. They have to meet some performance parameters to do that. So those are a very appropriate choice, and I like the price on those. So KEF is a bit tough because you can do it with the KEF Q series, but they don't really have a model of an in-wall KEF Q series that really has the output I would be looking for, and to get to the R series is over your budget. So just because of the way things are priced in KEF's lineup, I might not go for them in this particular room. One more that I would look at though would be Focal. Focal, let's see, what is the model name? You're looking at it there. It's
LCR6. IW LCR6.
All right, basically. Yeah, so 6 series. Now they have them at accessories for less, $900. The regular price is $1,200 each. So that's well over your budget, but that might be a consideration. But honestly, between the RBH and the mono price, I'm like...
the Focals look a lot like the mono price one.
They look a lot like the mono price one.
They have the same design.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have it looks like it has a backer box on it, but it doesn't. It's all open back there.
It's open back, yeah. You still need a separate backer box. So once you factor in backer box, because if you weren't factoring that into your price, then I would definitely go either the RBH or the monoprice monolith, just price-wise, to stay within the budget you wanted. But those are both really good choices. They've got the output you need and neutral sound, neutral as can be.
Yeah. Scroll down. Jack, how long have we been going?
An hour and 40. Okay. We got 20 minutes left.
Jack is working away using a he's using the multi-sub optimizer software to try and maximize the performance of his 4 subs. But he's getting into the part where he's trying to blend the subwoofer output with his main speakers, and clearly that is going to involve the bass management of his AV receiver and or processor. So what are the slopes that get applied to the low end of the speakers and the high end of the subwoofer output? Is it 12 dB per octave on both sides? And by the way, did we know that some people apparently use their theaters to watch movies? It sounds crazy. He's going to go back to listening to test tone sweeps all night. So
man after my own heart there, Jack.
Yeah,
that's very good.
So the two most common are what? 12 dB per octave or 24 dB per octave?
And in the case of pretty much all the mass market AV receivers you buy, they have stuck with the THX scheme from back in the day. Most of them aren't THX certified anymore, but they stuck with the bass management scheme that THX came up with, which was that they are not the same. The roll-off on the high end of the subwoofers, that is almost always 24 decibels per octave.
Right.
So wherever
the subwoofer rolls off faster.
Yeah. The subwoofer rolls off pretty fast at the top end, right? So it goes up to 80 hertz and then starts rolling off at 24 decibels per octave. But the speakers, most often in almost all mass market AV receivers, the bottom end of the speaker gets rolled off by the AV receiver at 12 decibels per octave, not 24. And that was because THX's scheme was that you were using sealed speakers that naturally started to roll off at 80 hertz themselves. So when you cascaded what the speakers, the sealed speakers were doing with a electronic 12 decibel per octave slope applied by the AV receiver, those two things cascading created a 24 decibel per octave slope. But that's pretty much what AV receivers have stuck with. There are some pre-pros that let you choose. They let you select what the slope is for the bottom end and the top end. So that is out there. But I'm pretty sure he was using either a Denon or Marantz. I'm pretty sure Jack was using that. So it'll be 12 decibels per octave on the low end of your speakers and 24 decibels per octave on the high end of your sub.
Okay. Mark's theater area is an open space in his house, fully pressurizing basically his whole house at 20 hertz. Probably wouldn't be pleasant for everybody else.
Chances are.
Just gonna say it. They don't like it, they can go outside for a while. And it would probably be very expensive, which is true. So he hasn't even tried. On top of that, the specs for his current subs indicate they don't reach all the way down to 20 hertz. So putting that all together, he's fairly certain he isn't hearing, feeling, or experiencing in any way the full 20 hertz experience there. But some subs actually play lower than what their specs say, and when we're watching movies, we aren't sitting there with the measurement going so that we can see on a graph what the 20 hertz output is, correct? Well, some of us...
I'm not. When I'm listening to sweeps, I might be.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So So in our theaters, how do we know? How do we tell the difference between, say, 30 hertz extension versus full 20 hertz extension? And are there particular movie scenes he could try that would tell him right away, like play this, and if you don't feel it here, such and such, you know you aren't getting 20 hertz. But if you do hear it, then you are. First of all, you're not going to hear 20 hertz. You're going to feel it. You won't hear it. It's too low.
I mean, your ears, you can feel it in your ears. Your ears are still responding at 20 hertz. So in that sense, you're hearing/feeling it.
Right. So the one that, I don't know what the hertz is. There's that one. It was a remake of one of those Japanese horror movies.
Okay.
Was it called Pulse or something like that?
Oh, there was Pulse. Yeah, there was Pulse.
And they go into the server room, and it there's this low hum that absolutely destroys if it's going, you know it, and if it's not going, you're going, what's the big deal with this scene? Everybody else is like,
listen to it on your computer, and you have no idea.
This is freaking me out. It is so low. But yeah, that's the one that I don't even own the movie, but that's one of the ones that I would point you to. The Nemo, when the submarine hits, is a very low hit as well. I think that goes. Does that go down to 20 hertz? I
don't think that's all the way down there.
I don't think so. But let me check it.
That one's a little bit higher. So I mean, I already alluded to it, but the really obvious one you could try, Mark, is to play a bass sweep. You can just go to audiocheck.net and make yourself a bass sweep, or you can connect your computer and use the sweep generator built into Room EQ Wizard. But play yourself a bass sweep, and that'll tell you right quick how far down you can go before that starts rolling off to the point that you are not hearing the frequencies that the sweep says it is playing anymore. So that one tells you pretty objectively how deep you're playing is just playing a bass sweep. But if you do just want movies to test it out, and you're saying, okay, how do these guys know they're hearing 20 hertz? I think maybe the most obvious one is Edge of Tomorrow, because it's right at the beginning. It's before the movie even starts. It's like while the movie logos are still going, they actually play test tones. And it just goes do 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 do, and it goes lower and lower and lower. And there's actually one that's down at 12 hertz that nothing plays except for crazy subs. But that one you can tell real quick because they just play descending test tones, and it's before the movie even starts, so it's right at the beginning. Edge of Tomorrow. One that I know DJ will love because Mark said he was going to ask DJ too. Monster Hunter, which is not a good movie. But it does have some crazy audio and video in it. And again, near the beginning, it's the opening action sequence of Monster Hunter. There is a monster that's beneath the sand. I forget the name of the monster, but it's beneath the sand. And you can, if your subs are playing 20 hertz and lower, you will feel the air moving just before the monster bursts up through the sand. So again, if you're on a system where it isn't playing that, you don't know something's coming. If you are using a system that can play those low frequencies, you're like, something's coming, and then it bursts up through the sand. So that's a fun one. And then a really subtle one that I like to mention, Dark Knight Rises, not the Dark Knight, Dark Knight Rises. Again, before the movie even starts, it's when Gary Oldman is giving his speech about Harvey Dent at the beginning, and the logo, the Batman logo comes up. It's like cracking in the ice. There's a really, really low thump, 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 thump. It almost feels like a heartbeat, but it's not exactly a heartbeat that's going on there. I will mention, though, it's only in the Blu-ray version, because that's one of the Ultra HD Blu-rays where they filtered out the ultra deep bass, and that thump, thump, thump is gone in the Ultra HD Blu-ray version. So the regular Blu-ray of Dark Knight Rises, there's right at the beginning there, when the Batman logo cracks in the ice. There. That's fine.
Oh, the 20. I guess there's 25 hertz information on the War of the Worlds, the pod emergence scene at the very beginning.
And again, you'd want only the Blu-ray of that, because the Ultra HD Blu-ray, they totally nerfed it.
Yeah, so I guess that's the other one. Right.
Okay.
I tried to find the Dory scene, but I guess the tap 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 part on that part is actually pretty low, but I don't know. I couldn't figure out what the actual frequency was, so look it up. Infinite Gary watched some videos about Trinov. There's quite a bit of hype and marketing about their unique auto setup and room correction program, but almost all of it seems to be about Trinov's ability to address multiple seating locations and less than ideal speaker placement. But for a dedicated home theater like Gary's, where the speakers are optimally placed and there's really only one seat, would Trinov provide any improvement or benefit over, say, Anthem room correction or Dirac? Or you could also add in Odyssey there. I mean, what... When you only have one seat to care about, it makes everything easier.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go so far as to say you could just take any old room correction from, like all the way down to, Odyssey 2 EQ or whatever we were talking about last week.
I wouldn't go that far, but
I wouldn't go that far.
You could definitely do it manually. You could definitely do it manually.
But this is, when it's only one seat, the room correction is trying to correct the entire room for, making sure that there's good bass and good sound everywhere. But if it's only one seat, that's really easy to correct for because it's only
Gary's
one
saying
seat.
His speakers are already properly positioned because the Trinov optimizer, it does have that. I think it's still unique, right? I don't know of any other programs that do the thing where it actually detects the genuine location angles.
Right.
It detects the angles of where your speakers actually are, and then it calculates where they should be, and it applies processing to. And it's not always perfect because we don't stereo locate in all directions around our head, but it does the best job it can to put the sounds into more than one speaker to get it to come out of the correct location in your room, even when your speakers aren't optimally positioned. I don't know of any other systems that do that, but if your speakers are already optimally positioned and it's just one seat, then I think obviously it's in the back of Gary's mind, since he loves to keep upgrading. If he went for a Trinov in his dedicated theater, is there really any justification for it? And honestly, Gary, the justification would be if you want to expand not just to a 9.1.6 channel Atmos system, but actually wanted to go beyond 15 speakers, because nobody else is doing that really besides Trinov in any reliable way. So that would be the real reason to do it in your situation, Gary. I don't think the Trinov optimizer all by itself would be enough of a difference over his current Anthem, for example.
So regarding this whole movie versus music versus game listening mode topic, which doesn't apply to Gary because he doesn't have a Den or Marantz, but whatever. Gary checked the manuals, and for his lexicon, there isn't any mention of being able to choose different versions of the Dolby Surround or DTS Neural X upmixers. His lexicon remote doesn't have movie, music, game listening modes buttons, so there doesn't seem to be any way to make such a selection. It's just Dolby Surround on or off. In the Marantz manual, it definitely mentions the movie, music, and game sound mode options, and the remote has them. But there's no description of what makes them different. It just says switches to the sound mode suitable for enjoying movies or music or games. Not exactly informative. We know.
Yeah.
That's why we keep talking about it, because we're the only ones talking about it. So on a technical level, how do we know what these modes are doing differently? And then for a processor like his Lexicon that doesn't even have the different modes, how does he know what it's doing when it applies Dolby Surround or DTS Neural X? The way I kind of look at it is this is a modification of what is happening to the DTS Neural X and the Dolby Surround modes. It's almost like adding a DSP on top of what these things do. So what they do is they take all the sounds and they put them up, they kind of try to make all the speakers do the things. And then for whatever reason, the Den and Marantz have decided that they're also going to do these other things on top of it, like a DSP mode. And Yamaha has similar functions where they have DSP modes that are applied. Now, I don't know exactly how they work as being applied on top of the Atmos, or the Dolby Surround or the DTS Neural X upmixers, but they have a ton of DSPs. So
yeah, as far as I know, the Yamahas, you can't apply their own unique DSPs on top of the upmixer. I don't think that's a thing. But regardless, way in the back of my mind, I know somebody else talked about this years ago, and for the life of me, I couldn't remember who it was or how to even look it up in terms of figuring out what the music versus game does differently. I don't have schematic. I'm not sure what it would be to point to say, okay, this is what it's doing. It's just the experience of listening to it, honestly. Yeah. Where, when you switch between them on a Den or Marantz, you're like, yeah, they do sound different. And then if you put your ear up to it, the music one is the easiest one to tell, because the music one, anything that was only in the center speaker in either the movie mode or the game mode, you walk over to your left speaker, walk it over your right speaker, and there's sound that is duplicated from the center speaker when they're in the music mode. So that one's very obvious. And then, the movie mode is fairly obvious because you can just hear the difference in reverb in the surround and surround back channels versus when you go to the game mode and there's no reverb anymore and there's no spreading of the sounds. So as far as I'm aware, when other receivers don't have any selection, they're pretty much applying what would be the movie version in Denon and Marantz. That is the default version. That's what it goes to if you use the auto mode in Denon and Marantz, is the movie version, because the idea was to up mix, to make your room sound bigger by making all the sounds come out of all the speakers and have a little bit of that reverb in there. So that seems to be the default.
Yeah. Let's see if we have enough time for somebody else.
I think we can
just
do one more. We should be able to do one more.
John. Last week we discussed John's DIY subwoofer plans using a pair of Scar Audio's 15-inch drivers powered by a Crown XLS amplifier and a pair of 4-foot tall 15-inch wide ported cabinets, i.e. the cat flatteners.
Right, yeah, if that ever fell over. Woo. Which is one of the things he wanted to clarify.
Sorry.
Big old folded port inside of there.
It's so funny to see this thing of this little little thing.
Cats.
I'm not saying the cat part was the funny part, but this
tell you,
monolith thing falling over.
If you do have a cat is going to get on top of that, and it's going to liquid itself down that folded port in there. That's what a cat's going to do. You're going to end up with a cat inside.
So it sounded to him like we had some confusion about some of his plans. Yeah, I think. So first he wanted to make things clear. So he's building 2 subwoofers. Yeah, we got it. No, we got that. We got that. Each Scar audio driver has dual voice coils. We also got that. His Crown amp has 2 channels. Understood that. Each channel can output 775 watts into 2 ohms. Yeah, I think we're okay there. So he's going to wire the dual voice coils of each Scar audio driver to create a 2 ohm load. That way his 2-channel amp can power both subwoofers. 1 amp, 2 subs. Got it.
We are on board.
We were on board with that. The final design is the result of a lot of simulation and calculation done using the WinISD program. You can input all kinds of parameters for the driver and cabinet, and thankfully they include a database of lots of different drivers, and then you can simulate all kinds of results for the calculated frequency response, impedance, distortion levels, blah. Okay. It was through all the simulation and calculation in WinISD that he settled on these drivers with this ported cabinet design. He tried others, but according to the results in WinISD, this came out with the best for what he wants. The exact dimensions and orientation of the cabinet are partly to do with making sure it will be easy to move via hand truck, which now the height makes sense. Mm-hmm. And to save on floor space, which, again, a height makes sense. He believes that since the heavy driver is at the bottom of the cabinet, that keeps the center of gravity low, and it shouldn't be easy to tip over. He also says he intends to have a sheet of Velcro on the bottom so that it grips to the floor. That's going to be some Velcro. That's going to be some, astronaut-grade Velcro there.
Also, that seems like we are attempting to couple the subwoofer to the floor.
Yes.
Literally adhere it to the floor in some fashion.
That would be the opposite of what we would normally suggest.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Velcro. And anyway, we'll finish off and then comment.
He didn't have any further questions regarding any of these clarifications, but we'd like to make any further comments. Yeah, don't Velcro it to the floor. Let's start right there.
I'm not a fan of the Velcro.
Second, there's no world where I can believe that you can't make a box that's wider. That has the same performance. There's no world where I cannot believe where you cannot make a box that's wider and more stable.
And
I honestly don't care, dude. I cannot. I'm not going to lose a minute of sleep over this thing. You build whatever you want. If this is what you decide on and you're dead set on it, knock yourself out. Have a great day. I'm just looking at it and saying, well, there's clearly some issues here. There's clearly.
We wanted to take some precautions and some caution because, look, the easy thing when you're a person who's offering advice to someone is to say, well, I would rather have you come back and say, you said to be careful, but I went ahead with my plan and it turned out great.
Yes.
Versus, you said everything I proposed is fantastic and I ended up with this problem. You didn't warn me about it.
Yeah.
We would rather be on the first side. So that's part of where we're coming from. And maybe that isn't entirely fair, but that is genuinely part of where we're coming from. We would rather err on the side of wording, speaking every drawback that we can think of, and then
I don't want you to send me a picture of a little gravestone with the "Here lies my very flat cat." I just don't want. I don't want that. Tom never said it. Tom never warned me.
Right. Now you're very much right about the center of gravity is going to be low with the driver down there, but you side mounted the drivers, so it's wiggling itself back and forth. That's the direction that this thing is going. I don't know how heavy the cabinet itself is, but with a side firing driver that still can still wobble. Especially once it's playing the resonant frequency of the cabinet.
Right.
Because now everything wants to move. and move it shall, which is probably why he went for the Velcro, but Velcro is coupling the sub to the floor. I am much more in favor of our idea of going with our placement suggestion of the midpoints of your two side walls, which, yes, both subs are behind your theater area, but they are at the midpoints of the two side walls of your room, and now they're up against a wall, and I'm not really worried about any of this stuff anymore, and you're going to put them on some rubber pads, and that should be fine. So the only other comment I had was that you've used WinISD, looks like a perfectly reasonable program. If it were that easy to design a subwoofer, nobody would ever have to build a prototype. That's sort of the thing, right? Because, I mean, it can input specs. That's great. They can input specs and it can calculate based on those specs. When you actually physically build the thing, there are sometimes unforeseen outcomes, which is why a company like SVS, they design their subs in software, just like you did. They absolutely do that.
They might even be using the same software for all
we
know.
I don't know, but they absolutely do. But then they build prototypes, and we have never had Gary on the show where he said, yeah, we nailed it on the first try. Right. That has never been the case.
Well, I mean, this is, to me, just that port scares the Jesus out of me, trying to figure out how to make that port work. And then we're not even talking about bracing. There's no talk about
we don't
how
know.
this
I mean, I'm pretty sure there is, but we don't know from we only had two images, and there were
and that
renderings.
reduces interior the inside volume of the cabinet. So there's, that's not calculated into this either, as far as I can tell. I mean, I'm looking inside the driver box thing, and there's no bracing in there that I can see. So, there's other considerations. But then again, I'm not the one that designed this. You are. So if you've thought about all of this, great. If that's all been calculated in, also great. If you're dead set on it, great. We're just looking at it with the limited amount of information we have that you have given us, and these are our thoughts. Okay. Yep. So he said, I mentioned that he'll need a mini DSP to apply high pass and low pass filters and to EQ any nonlinearity in the frequency response, but he was hoping to use what he already has on hand. His Crown amp can apply a low pass filter, so that can take care of rolling off the high end of the subs. Technically, it can apply a high pass filter too, but the lowest it goes is 30 hertz, so he doesn't intend to use that. His pre-pro is the Outlaw 976 that supplies 8-band of fully adjustable parametric EQ for each output channel, including the sub, plus low and high shelf filters. So he intended to use that instead of a mini DSP. Any reason why that wouldn't work? I mean, you still have to do a ton of measurement and everything else, but yeah, I guess it works.
Well, you can certainly, for example, I'm assuming he's going to be using some Room EQ Wizard to calculate
what he needs,
the parametric bands, and you absolutely can just have it on screen show you what the parametric parameters, right? So the frequency,
the Q and
the Q. And the amplitude. So you can absolutely have Room EQ Wizard supply that for an 8-band parametric EQ, and you can input that into your Outlaw, and that'll work. I mean, that's all you're doing with a mini DSP too, is inputting the results that Room EQ Wizard calculates. It's just that it knows exactly what a mini DSP can do. In your case, you're going to use a generic, and it's going to output it. You're going to tell it you have 8 bands, so that'll totally work. But the one thing there is that with the mini DSP, you could, if you wanted to, have independent settings for each sub.
That's
Whereas,
true.
as far as I'm aware, on the Outlaw, it's going to be the same settings for both subs. Now, that should be okay. You're in a rectangular room. If you go with our placement of the midpoints of the two side walls, we would have you run the subs in mono anyway.
Sure.
So that should be okay.
So to do this, though, you'd have to take your receiver. Well, no, you'd have to take your amplifier and your subwoofer out into a field someplace, right? And then stand it up the way that you normally would, so that you're basically EQing the response of the sub alone, not in your room, but just alone, because that's what we're worried about more than anything. We're not worried about in the
design and build phase,
because that's what you'll have to EQ, so that you know that both subs are getting the same EQ and that it is EQing it to a flat, which is basically what you get when you get an SVS sub or somebody else. They have internal DSP and stuff like that is EQing it to a flat level.
Yeah,
so
flat anechoic, flat in a wide open field.
Right, in a wide open field, so that when you put it in your room, you know it's whatever's happening to the sub is happening to the sub because of
the room,
the room, and then you apply your room correction on top of that, which will help even it out even more. Now you have taken away the ability to do that.
Right.
you will have taken it away, because you will have your receiver doing the EQing of the sub to flat in the anechoic, or in this case quasi-anechoic situation of it being out in a field, and then you can no longer apply any more EQ. Now, in theory, you'll get pretty even response, from the front, the placement that we've told you to put it in, if you do in fact put it there, but you will not be able to apply any more EQ to it. You'll not be able to apply any room correction to it at that point.
Like, I gotta say, given all of the research and that he's done, like using WinISD and all that stuff, I'm almost surprised he isn't champing at the bit to get a mini DSP.
Yeah,
really.
Really.
This seems like it's right up your alley, man.
Yeah.
Like, you can do, like, not only that, you can have 4 different configurations saved within the mini DSP and switch them on the fly, so you can have one that's got a big bass boost, like for some of those Ultra HD Blu-ray movies where they filtered off the low bass. You can have a configuration that's just for those. You can have one that's like for ruler flat, if that's what you want to test out. You can have one with a house curve built in. Like, you have these 4 different configurations ready to go inside the mini DSP. I'm like, I can't believe he's not just like gung-ho for it, to be honest.
Right. So, I mean, what you could do is you could do what you're talking about, which is take, get your receiver to do the 8 bands, if that's enough, to flatten out your sub. Then you get your mini DSP and use that as your room correction, so that you can then make flat room response. Flat in-room response for more than one seat, which is not the same as having flat response of the sub itself. Right. So that you basically have the receiver adjust the subwoofer so that it is flat anechoically or quasi-anechoically. Then you take your mini DSP and you apply that to each sub individually, so that you can get in-room response that is also flat.
You could do it vice versa too. You could have the mini DSP, so that out in the wide open field, after it's gone through the mini DSP, what comes out of the subs is linear there, and then you could do the room tuning with the Outlaw, because at that point you are, the 2 subs together are playing linear in anechoic, and then you get them into the room and tune it. So either way
works. Yes. So on a different topic, he's going to be making some absorption panels and bass traps. They're going to be 1 inch thick and 72 feet tall.
I don't know what dimensions he's going for.
I don't know. They're not going to be just rectangles.
Well,
So
I know it's going to be smaller than 37 inches wide and 74 inches tall, because that's coming up, what he's planning to use.
So he wants to have custom images on the fabric. He found fineartamerica.com, who will sell printed images on lots of different items. They don't seem to sell just plain fabric, though. So John was thinking he could order the images he wants on their beach towels. They have 2 sizes, 32 by 64, or 37 by 74. The towels have a white cotton back and a microfiber front where the image will be printed on it. Will these work, or will they mess up the sound waves and be useless as covers for acoustic panels? Why would you reinvent this wheel? We've already talked about a number of different places that you can go to do this, and microfiber. Go up to a towel and blow through it, and tell me that there's nothing impeding the air passing through.
Like, usually with most towels, the air will go through. It's not 100% block, but it's
not acoustically transparent.
Not exactly easy to blow through most towels.
Right.
Yeah, because they're thick. They're kind of thick.
Yes, they are thick. So that's the whole point. They're supposed to be thick and absorptive. So, and God help you if you have humidity in your room. Now it's going to be absorbed by those towels as well, which is going to make them even less
heavier,
acoustically transparent.
Rip off the walls.
I would just get acoustically transparent fabric printed from like Spoonflower or wherever it is that we normally tell
Spoonflower or My Fabric Designs. My Fabric Designs seems to be more of the place home theater people are going these days. So they've got a couple of fabrics that people really like. If you want it to be a little bit glossy and not stretchy at all, then people go with the Silky Fail fabric. So that one is not stretchy whatsoever, but it is a little bit glossy, and it's not quite as easy to blow through. Whereas the one that is the easiest to blow through still has very nice print quality, but it's not glossy, and it has a little bit of a stretch to it, is the Performance Knit. So a lot of people really like the Performance Knit, but that's the one where this is going back years now, but Rob W., listener of the podcast, he sent in his whole guide of how he printed his acoustically transparent fabric and put it on his DIY panels. And he had a great tip there, which was when you are designing this in software like Photoshop or GIMP or something, he drew in a very thin little border of exactly what the width of the panel should be, so that if the fabric had any stretch in it, he could align it to the border he had printed as part of the image, and therefore didn't overstretch or understretch the fabric. So that was a really good tip there.
Yes. And this is, and it's a 60 inches wide printable area. So you've got 60 inches wide, and however long you want, because it's yards and yards of fabric. So that should be able to do you for whatever you want here, except that, so with the 64 inch width, or I guess that was a 32 inch width and the 37 inch width, that's just not gonna, that's
that's the 2 feet wide by 4 feet tall.
Yeah.
That'll work enough to wrap around the corners.
You would be just wrapping that around the corners anyway. So I would. Yeah,
I'm not keen on beach towel. That just strikes me as being a little too. It's panels. It's not like we're trying to actually put a speaker behind it and play it through it. They'd definitely muffle the sound there.
Right.
So it's not like it's going to be the end of the world, but it just seems it's too heavy. It's too thick. It will block some of the sound. I wouldn't go for beach towel. Not when you can go to My Fabric Designs.
It'd be harder to work with too. And So, all right, we got only one last question, so we'll go ahead and answer it.
Oh wow.
Excuse
Okay.
me. Chad's dad needs a new pre-pro. Get an AV receiver. We're done. Bye-bye.
Well, that's coming up.
He's using Genelec?
Professional monitor. That's studio monitor speakers.
Yeah. So those already have amplification built in. They can accept both XLR and RCA. He's been using XLR, but the wire runs are short, so it wouldn't be a big deal to replace them. The setup is 5.1, but he's got an 8K TV plus a Crestron system to control everything. So interesting. Chad is wondering what's the best way to go here. Would it be worth it to pay for more for a model with XLR outputs? Could he save money by getting a Denon and Marantz receiver and just using RCA? Which specific model? The 3700H. We already said at the beginning of the thing.
Yeah.
So
I do only have to say they're a little bit hard to find right now, but I would easily go with an X3700H as long as you can find one to purchase. The only other thing I would say is, I don't know when those Onkyos are coming out, because when it comes to 8K TV, if you want to connect 3 8K sources, because you can connect one 8K source to the X3700H, you would actually need to get it and then contact Denon with your serial number and get the SPK618 adapter box. There's some hassle there, and you can only plug in one, but you can plug 3 8K sources into the Onkyo, and the Onkyo is going to have Dirac on it too. So
hopefully, we don't know. Hopefully.
Yeah, that was the announcement. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, nothing is out there yet.
Nothing is out until it's out.
If you're in a big hurry and you can find an X3700H, we totally stand behind it. But if you aren't,
we have no idea what the preamp section of that Onkyo is going to sound like either. It might have noise. There's other things to consider.
I guess. Yeah.
But we'll have to wait until the Onkyos come out. If it were me, this is a good time to wait. How many times am I going to say it? This is a good time to wait.
And it seems like we won't have to wait a whole lot longer. Yeah. So that is all the information there, Chad. I think you can buy right now or you can wait a little bit.
With this Onkyo announcement, you can bet your bottom dollar that almost certainly by the time this podcast hits the actual airwaves,
Denon and Marantz
will have announced something, or Yamaha will have announced something. I am telling you, that's how they're like, oh my God.
Yamaha already announced theirs. We know those are coming, but we also know they themselves said they won't have the 8K and the 4K 120 without a firmware update. You will need a firmware update, and I do not trust that anymore.
No.
Yeah.
No. It's because they let Emotiva do it. All right. Thank our listeners of the week one more time. We thank Michael and Rafal.
I feel so bad. I wish I knew how to pronounce that name.
I don't know
Michael
how to say it.
Rafal. Rafal. I'm going with Rafal. Michael Rafal. Yeah. Thank you very much for the PayPal donations, regardless.
And our 126 patrons over at patreon.com.
Yeah, patreon.com/AVRant podcast if you would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. Thanks very much to our 126 patrons over there.
And thanks for the notes of gratitude from Jay, Lance, Mark, Dan, Brenda's husband, and Chad.
Yeah, Jay, Lance, Mark, Dan. I'll actually go ahead and say Andrew. He's been a very good sport, so he gets to have his own name said by one of us. And Chad, Thank you all very much for the notes of gratitude and encouragement for keeping the podcast going. Thank you to everybody who continues to listen and send in your questions.
All right. That's right. If you want to get your question answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
want your question answered, send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.